situated within the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals framework. These problems are food for all, mental health systems, climate change mitigation, water pollution, and reducing inequalities. We have challenged our students to propose an applied innovation, an improvement over existing solutions to help solve their chosen problem. Today on Catalyst Day, the students in Catalyst 300 will present their applied innovations to the whole campus community and beyond. These talks will be given in the morning in a conference-style program. Students from the Catalyst 210 Intercultural Competence Seminar are currently participating in a Leadership, Diversity, and Inclusion retreat down in the Wilmore Center. This afternoon, we will host the Applied Innovation Hackathon, which is a collaborative problem-solving event, which will be here in Great Hall. And then at the end of the day, Will Allen, one of the most influential leaders in the food security and urban farming movement, will deliver a keynote address here in Great Hall.
All right, we're almost ready for the program to begin. So the first group, start thinking about what you're going to do in all the various rooms. Some thanks, and then we will jump into it. First of all, we need to thank, and I need to thank, the faculty of Ripon College. The faculty 4 years ago took a huge risk. They decided to throw out the previous general education and adopt something completely new, completely innovative, and completely exciting. And there was a huge amount of risk involved in that, and it's been a huge amount of work to make it a reality. And they deserve a lot of thanks and a lot of respect. Secondly, I want to thank the staff and administration of Ripon College, who've been working really hard to support Catalyst Day and work hard all the time to support the students here. This is a place that can't function without hundreds of people who are working all the time to make sure that the students who come here are comfortable, are healthy, and are ready to learn and to perform. I need to thank some of our partners and the foundations who have supported the implementation of the Catalyst curriculum, in particular the Associated Colleges of the Midwest, the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations, the Margaret A. Cargill Foundation, and the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, all of whom have provided significant resources over the last 3.5 years to make this a reality. I need to thank our alumni and donors of the college whose generosity both support Catalyst and Catalyst Day, but more importantly, the 150-some years of this college altogether and the next 100 years that there will be. Thanks to the guests who have come to campus to see what our students can do and who are watching around the world on our webcast, and will watch this in the future. And finally, and most importantly, I want to thank the students in the junior class who are getting ready to show us what they can do. And I want to say one thing that I think is really important. Today is a test. It's not a test of you, although you're being evaluated. This is a test of Ripon College. We say we prepare students to innovate and to be productive citizens and to go out and change the world. We say that we prepare you to tackle any kind of problem. And what we've done here is challenge ourselves publicly in a high-stakes way to prove to the world that what we say we do for you, we actually do for you. So the test of today is a test for the college and for the faculty of the college. And I hope that we have passed it by preparing you to succeed today. Thank you.
And good morning again. My name is Becky Matsky. I'm a professor of history, and I've been one of this semester's 6 Catalyst 300 faculty mentors. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone again, all of you here in the room today, and everybody watching online. I'm here to, again, announce each of these talks and to be the monitor. We'll have 20-minute talks followed by 5 minutes of question and answer. So just a reminder, again, this is the Catalyst 300 Applied Innovation Seminar. This is students working to present their innovative solutions to real-world problems. So our first talk today by our first group will be the positive effects of bringing green plastic production to Ripon. Please come on up.
All right, good morning, everyone. We're doing well today. So we're going to talk to you, as Professor Maskey just said, about the positive effects of bringing green plastic to the Ripon area. This is done by Alex, Alora, myself, Todd, and Zelina. So in 2015, 6.3 billion metric tons of plastic were produced globally. 262.4 million of those tons were produced in the United States alone. 7% of that, 262.4 million, was recycled. As well, 85% were landfilled, the rest being dumped into the ocean, threatening the lives of many sea creatures and making many bodies of water impassable. One such area here is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, currently twice the size of Texas, and growing. Currently, around 80% of its contents are plastic-based, with some pieces dating back to the 1970s. So yes, plastic disposal is harmful to the environment, but so is plastic production. For every 1 kilogram of plastic generated, 6 kilograms of carbon dioxide is generated. So this, to put into perspective, is around 182 plastic bags, as you can see here. Wow. And so 6 kilograms of carbon dioxide is typically the amount of air that fits into 5 full-size family refrigerators, to put that in perspective.
So during plastic production, you have carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide that are produced, and these help trap the sun's heat close to the surface of the earth. At natural levels, these carbon levels help regulate the Earth's temperature. However, through the use of fossil fuels by humans, they have caused carbon levels to rise 105 parts per million above naturally occurring levels. As you can see in this graph, at 2017, we were at 405 parts per million for carbon levels, compared to the previous high of 300 parts per million. You can also see in this graph that the carbon levels were able to re-regulate themselves over time. However, we have not been able to see that since. These increased carbon levels are what are causing an increase in temperatures as well as other volatile weather patterns known as climate change. And although climate change affects many things, just 2 of them are the impact it has on human health and the impact it has on animal habitats. So climate change is continuing to provoke human health problems by temperature extremes. Up until 1975, the warming rate was only 0.7 to 0.9 degrees Celsius each decade. But from 1975 to present, the global temperature has risen by 1.5 to 1.8 degrees Celsius, which is double that of the previous time period. And this increasing temperature is what is increasing the risk of these heat-related deaths. However, on the other hand, you can also experience cold, extreme temperatures. And researchers are predicting that the cold temperature extremes will be more severe than they were in the 20th century. And we've already seen this with the 2019 polar vortex, which resulted in 25 deaths and hundreds of counts of hypothermia and frostbite. So this image here is showing NASA's prediction for what climate change will be like in the year 2100. The areas that have more red are going to be experiencing increased heat-related temperatures, whereas the areas that are more blue are going to be experiencing colder temperature extremes. Furthermore, climate change is also affecting animals' habitats, specifically polar bears, because the increased temperatures are depleting the Arctic ice. In just 3 decades, there have been 770,000 square miles of Arctic ice lost, which is about 11.5% each decade. This depleting ice is overall increasing sea levels, which in turn is destroying other coastal habitats. And so this first image here is showing the Arctic the ice depletion in Alaska from 1909 to 2004. And as you can see, there is no ice left in the 2004 image. Whereas the second image is actually showing the Arctic ice depletion from 1979 to 2015. And you can see that there is depleting ice, especially in this area right here.
So as Zelina has just explained, the effects of climate change can be seen globally. However, responsibility for generating the carbon emissions that contribute to climate change is not globally shared. As you can see from this graph published by the Environmental Protection Agency in 2015, just 2 countries are responsible for about 45% of the world's total carbon emissions. Those countries are the United States and China. Now, my group doesn't presume to change carbon emission levels in China, although they do need addressed. Instead, we would like to focus on reducing carbon emissions from the United States, starting with those in our own backyard, the Ripon and Fond du Lac area. Fond du Lac County has traditionally been a huge producer of plastics, but currently most of the plastic products they produce use petroleum as a base, which is harmful to the environment. As you can see from this chart, producing a plastic product from a petroleum base releases carbon emissions at 5 general points. When extracting the raw material for use, when transporting that material to a factory for processing, when processing that material into a finished plastic product, when distributing that product for sale and use, and when disposing of that product, typically in a landfill. One study by Aaron Dormer and colleagues found that of the carbon emissions released from this whole process, about 45% were released during the raw materials phase. A further 38% were released during manufacture, so those are the phases to target. In order to reduce those carbon emissions, some companies have turned to using a renewable base for their plastics instead of petroleum. Some existing companies use corn or sugarcane as the base, and Alora will talk more about that momentarily. There's also a growing movement to use hemp as the starting material, and this is an idea that we think has promise and that we would like to make viable right here in the Ripon area. So the advantage of using any renewable material, be it corn, sugarcane, or hemp, mostly lies in reducing the carbon emissions from the raw materials phase, which is a little under half of the total emissions. When extracting petroleum for use, there's a lot of machinery involved to drill it out of the ground or out of the ocean, wherever you're extracting it from, and this generates a lot of carbon while doing nothing to remove it from the atmosphere. When growing a plant for use, there's still machinery involved for planting the seeds, fertilizing, and harvesting, but plants remove carbon dioxide from the air as they grow, meaning that any carbon generated by the machinery is removed by the plant during its growth process. Overall, the process is carbon neutral, meaning that the stage that once generated the highest levels of carbon emissions now generates essentially none. So now you have an idea of the benefits of any type of bioplastic. Alora will now describe some existing bioplastics, their advantages, and why we think they're not the right fit for the Ripon area.
So when we were doing research for this project, we came across 2 types of bioplastics that we thought that have been successfully used in other countries and then here in America. So the first one we're going to talk about is sugarcane plastic. Sugarcane plastic has successfully been implemented in South America. It's known as PHB. So this plastic is made out of sugarcane and it is used in many manufacturers' plastics, and it is an important step towards actual bioplastics. And Brazil has been the most positively impacted by this plastic as they make most of the sugarcane. So by this little graphic here, you can see the actual overall this cycle that Alex had been talking about. So it starts with our cars and then the growth, as well as going into the factories, becoming recycled like a sugarcane product. And then of course, this happy little girl is recycling it. The issue with this is that it has not been implemented in other parts of the world. This is because sugarcane has a relatively narrow area where it can grow. In addition, PHB yield from sugarcane remains low, so it is inefficient to produce sugarcane plastic. So this is just showing you that we are in fact using sugarcane in a lot of products, as well as it just looks like a regular plastic. Another solution for the removal of harmful plastics would be with the use of biodegradable corn plastic, named PHA. Corn-based PHA plastic positively impacts the United States as the main factory is in our Midwestern state of Iowa. It allows less transportation costs to the US, and this helps with emission levels. Many companies use PHA, but there are other types of corn plastics called PLA. for their packaging needs. So this is just kind of showing you the difference between how they take corn and it turns into this plastic, and then this cup is actually full of, is made out of PLA. In high temperatures, PLA plastic can become a glass, creating an issue for it in the high impact factory business. Any treatment to PHA or PLA causes it to lose its biodegradability, making it like plastics that we already have in production. PLA bioplastics work well in most industries, but when you want to recycle these plastics, the temperature has to be at 140 degrees Fahrenheit before it can even start to decompose. This also includes most sugarcane plastics that I talked about already. And many recycling plants do not have the capabilities to try and recycle the corn and sugarcane plastics, creating another issue. Using hemp reduces some of the negative aspects of both corn and sugarcane plastic. First, unlike sugarcane, it is a viable plant for the Ripon area. Wisconsin has also historically led the nation in hemp production. In the earliest 20th century, Wisconsin was one of the top growers nationwide before it became illegal. In contrast, growing sugarcane in Wisconsin would be absurdly unsustainable. First, it needs a tropical or subtropical environment, which Ripon assuredly does not have. Second, hemp plastic is easier to work with and to dispose of than corn plastic. Left untreated, hemp plastic will decompose in 6 to 9 months in your normal backyard compost pile. This is in contrast to other bioplastics, which I mentioned earlier, have to be heated to 140 degrees Fahrenheit before they can even start to decompose. All right, so this next slide is something we wanted to talk about before we got into any of our business plans, due to the fact we are in a conservative area and that there might be issues with the farmers not wanting to grow hemp. So this is just a quick little infographic. So first of all, the plants look completely different. Hemp also has a low THC, which means it's not going to be psychoactive. It adapts really well, so it can grow pretty much anywhere. It's a very hardy plant, and you can use it to make clothing, body care, cars. If you can think of it, you can probably make it out of hemp. Marijuana, on the other hand, has a high THC, which is about 5 to 35%. This makes it psychoactive. It's a very, very, very picky plant. It's hard to grow, and of course, there are only 2 uses, which are medical and recreational. And now Alex and Selena are going to talk about our business plan and how we want to get the farmers involved.
So, we are looking for investors to invest in our business, Ripon Good Hemp. And our idea is to use hemp to produce plastic packaging materials. And we have chosen to do plastic packaging materials because they account for so much of the plastic waste produced each year. A study by Geiger and colleagues in 2015 showed that packaging resulted in 141 million tons of plastic waste produced this year. And that is way higher than any of the other sectors, as you can see in this graph, which is why we're trying to combat packaging plastics. So we intend on buying a building here in the Ripon area, which is what we are going to use to make our plastic packaging materials. We will also be working with farmers to help educate them and to convert them to growing hemp, which will then be bought back by our business. Currently, most of Ripon's farmers are producing corn, and that corn is not staying local. Furthermore, corn actually requires a lot of water and fertilizer to grow. On the other hand, hemp, because it would be grown in Ripon and used locally here by our factories, it would stay local. And furthermore, hemp also requires about 1/3 as much water and similarly low levels of fertilizer to produce it. We also plan on building our own greenhouse to combat any effects that climate change might have on growing seasons for farmers. So in this greenhouse, we plan to harvest our own hemp every 3 to 4 months. This would allow us to have our own product instead of having to rely just on farmers in case they have a bad growing season one year.
Once we've bought or produced this hemp, we'll use it to make plastic packaging products. This can be anything from industrial plastic wrap to packing peanuts to, as you can see before you, plastic bags. And once we produce these products, we intend to sell them to shipping companies, starting locally in the Fox Valley area and one day hopefully expanding across state borders. We also intend to open a compost site adjacent to our factory to make recycling all green plastic products available for Ripon residents. Our hemp plastic will be safe to just throw in a backyard compost pile, but not every type of bioplastic is safe. So our composting facility will make it accessible for people to bring their products to us and have them disposed of for free. If we expand, every new factory we open will have its own compost site nearby to make recycling green products accessible to surrounding communities. This graphic explains kind of our business layout. There in the lower right is Ripon Town, where you are now. Up in the top right is our factory, and in between the town and the factory is our free compost facility. On the other side of the factory is our greenhouse, where we'll be producing a limited supply of our own hemp in case there's a low yield year. And there are the farmers' fields where we'll be getting the majority of the hemp that we'll use. So in order to get this business up and running, we need a loan of $879,600 from investors to be repaid in full within 10 years. We ourselves are willing to put up $219,900 through a combination of our own savings and donations from angel investors, who are people like friends and family who are interested in seeing our business get up off the ground but have no interest in repayment. This is projected growth for the first 3 years. So as you can see, in year one, we expect our total sales to reach $3,702,350. But after cost of sales and expenses, our net income will only be about $481,513. By year three, we project our sales to reach $6,016,318, and our net income to reach $1,478,623.
All right, so you guys just heard our business plan, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the legalities behind our business plan. So in the year 2017, at the state level, the Wisconsin Act 100 was passed. So what that entails is it legalizes industrial hemp statewide. So we are able to grow it, market it, whatever we see fit as far as the business aspect goes. So in order to partake in such activities, we must register and obtain a license with the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. So with the application of that license and registration requires consent to background checks, consent to inspections, either set up periodically or unannounced, and testing of the crops 30 days before harvest seasons. So what the testing consists of is an agent from the DATCP will come out into our greenhouse or a farmer's field, collect random samples from each field, and take it back to the lab to make sure that the THC level is below that 0.3% threshold that Laura had previously explained. So what we ourselves would need would be the grower license, processor license, grower registration, and the processor registration as well. So the licenses here are, once you have them one time, you have them for life unless they get revoked. However, the registrations must be done annually. So once we have the two licenses, we will have them for life, and the registrations will need to be done annually as well. In addition, the farmers that we have contracts to buy from will only need the grower license and registration, which we fully plan on reimbursing them as part of the contract. So right here is a map of the United States released by the National Hemp Association, talking about where it's legal in the United States to produce and market industrial hemp. So the latest was in August of 2017. Since then, 6 states in the Midwest alone have passed completely industrial hemp. Of those states included Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio, Kansas, Missouri, and Iowa. So once we decide to open it up over state lines, virtually we will have free range to sell to anyone in the Midwest. Currently in the Midwest, there are 3 states who do not have full legalization of industrial hemp. 2 of those 3 states, Michigan and South Dakota, currently have bills pending to, at the state level, pass industrial hemp legalization. So once we decide to open it up out of the Fox Valley area and out of Wisconsin, the Midwest would be virtually where we'd open up to first, and we would have virtual free range to sell and market to any businesses in the Midwest.
In summary, plastic production is damaging our planet through the creation of physical waste and carbon emissions. We propose to combat both aspects by making hemp plastic production accessible to the Fond du Lac area. This will improve the health of farmers' fields, increase jobs in the Ripon area, and allow us to have a sustainable form of plastic that reduces carbon emissions and physical waste. We have a business plan and are eager to get it up and running. We just need you, the investors, to help us make the planet greener, one plastic bag at a time. All right, and then before any clapping, we just want to give out our acknowledgements to these professors who specifically have helped us on our project throughout the semester. So thank you guys. Questions?
All right, thank you. We will have 5 minutes for question and answers. We will have a microphone available for you. We ask that you use that to ask your questions. So please, any questions for our group on Ripon hemp?
Thank you for that interesting talk. I just have a question about whether the biodegradability of hemp-based plastic interferes at all with some of the conventional uses of plastic for longer-term storage containers and so on.
So we actually did look at that. It really doesn't do anything if it gets wet. It doesn't really seem to do anything to it. It seems to be able to be long-term. There are special bacteria in compost piles specifically that allow the plastic to decompose. So unless you're getting your plastics just absolutely covered in dirt and compost, you should be completely fine long-term for storage, for us to have it in our warehouses for long-term use.
Hi, a question about creating green plastic. So you have a business model, which would then, in order for it to be successful, you would be producing as much green plastic as possible. I wonder if there might be a discrepancy between producing more so that your business is successful and conservation overall, which would perhaps allude to making and creating less plastic.
So the question is that we would not produce 100% hemp plastic? Is that the question?
Well, I guess, yeah, I'm sorry, if I can clarify. So if the idea of creating green plastic is to use fewer resources and to conserve and mitigate pollution, right? The business model of producing more plastic would use resources and maybe have a lesser conservation aspect, right? So it's almost like there's a paradox between producing a successful business of green plastic and conserving plastic and resources overall.
So I think our main issue here would probably be that overall we'd advocate please stop using as much plastic, please. We'd be probably really open about admitting that, yeah, while we want our business to be up and running really, really well, that our main goal is to be plastic free. But I think right now, we just have to hope that switching over to hemp plastic will eventually bring us to no plastic. And hopefully by that time, we'll all be able to retire and we won't have to even think about it again.
What does the price of this plastic look like? So are people in poverty going to be able to even afford a plastic like that?
So right now, plastic is sold at 11.3 cents per pound, and we sell it at 12 cents to be competitive with the market as well as cover the expenses.
And one thing we should note is that it will mostly be the shipping companies paying for this plastic. So when you go to the store, you're not really expected to pay the price of the plastic bags you walk out with. That's not something that we're asked to do here in Wisconsin. So it wouldn't really affect people who are living below the poverty line, it would mostly be affecting the shipping companies. I think we have time for one more question.
Great. If you guys get your business up and running, do you plan on partnering with the local grocery stores like Webster's to implement your plastics instead of them using regular plastics?
We did think about this, yes. We talked about partnering with Webster's, Menards, as it is a Wisconsin-based company. We decided that I have worked in Menards, so I know how much plastic is wasted. So just the overall shipping sections, we would want to partner with Webster's, Menards, and eventually try and get all of the areas around here. But mostly, yes, the hometown choice essentially stores we would want to do. Yes.
Thanks everybody for your questions. Again, thank you for participating in our Catalyst Day presentations. Our next talk will begin at 8:45. Thank you.
I think it's like the reputations and I don't think clearly. Yeah, it's like fair enough.
Be here all day.
Good morning again, everybody, and welcome to the second of our talks from our Catalyst 300 Applied Innovation Seminar. Again, this talk is students working together to come up with an applied solution to a real-world problem. And our second presentation this morning is Mending the Achievement Gap. Please come on up.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Max.
I'm Yufa.
I'm Courtney.
And I'm Brianna.
Today, we're going to be mending the achievement gap. So starting with just general inequalities in education, there's a lot of variables to look at. These things that create the inequalities are things such as race and ethnicity and socioeconomic status of the student and their family, as well as geographical things as far as if they live in an urban or rural area. These different disparities have created what is popularly called the achievement gap. And that is basically a difference in academic success between students of different races or ethnicities, students of different socioeconomic classes, or students in different areas, whether it be urban or rural. And basically, certain students are at disadvantages because of variables that they can't control, being their race, their socioeconomic status, things of that nature. There's been a lot of solutions in the past to try to fix this achievement gap and even out student success in our public schools. None of them have really worked, as the achievement gap still exists to this day. But a lot of them were focused on funding, so basically putting more money into the school, spending more money per student, and these have not exactly worked. Others have focused on changing the curriculum, so what the students are learning and what they're supposed to be learning, and what the teachers are supposed to be teaching them, as well as redistricting. So mostly aiming at changing the class sizes of certain schools, making sure schools aren't overpopulated and teachers aren't overwhelmed within their classes. Something that we found that has a direct effect on student achievement is teacher retention. So instead of focusing on funding or changing the curriculum or possibly redistricting as other solutions have in the past, we're going to look at teacher retention. So to put these disparities into numbers, we have a nice graph here from the 2015-2016 academic school year for public schools in the United States. The top one there just shows the general student population. So you can see that half the students in the United States are white, and then you can see the other race breakdowns there. But then when you look at the number of students in poverty, we have the same percentage of black students as white students in poverty, and actually more Hispanic students living in poverty, even though there's way more white students overall in the country. And especially when looking at low-income schools, the disparities get even worse, whereas you see twice as many black students living in low-income, or going to low-income schools, which basically means they live in low-income areas, and way more Hispanic students living in and going to low-income schools. So obviously there's a problem here, and these disparities come up on race lines. Unfortunately, this racial discrepancy in student achievement is actually worse in our state here. So the first graph is just graduation rates for the 2015-2016 school year across the United States. So the black bar all the way over on your left is the national graduation rate at 84%, and then you can see the different breakdowns for the different races and ethnicities. The bar on the bottom here shows the discrepancy between the graduation rate for black students and white students. So as you can see, it's pretty stark and it's pretty big. And for Hispanic students in Wisconsin, they graduate at an 80% rate, which is 1% better than the national average, but of course it's still 13% lower than the graduation rate for white students. So unfortunately in Wisconsin, we actually have a worse kind of racial disparity for graduation rate. So as you can see, the racial inequalities are definitely a significant factor here. But as well, the socioeconomic inequality plays a big part in a student's academic success. A Stanford study that looked at over 2,000 public schools in the United States found that factors that directly impact student achievement are whether or not they live in a low-income area and their family is a low-income family, and whether or not they live in poverty. But they found that actually a student's academic success is not related to a district's per capita spending. So in other words, it doesn't actually matter how much money a district puts in per student. It doesn't actually fix their achievement or actually help them achieve any better in school. And what this creates too is a cycle of poverty. So basically students that live in poverty don't get the education they deserve and cannot get out of poverty. And this just means that their children live in poverty and so on and so on. The cycle of poverty is a general thing, but education is definitely a big part of it in a way that people can get out of poverty. Studies have also found that living in distressed neighborhoods greatly impacts graduation rates. So obviously if this cycle continues and students for generations continue to live in distressed neighborhoods, their rate of getting out of that neighborhood is just lower and lower as the generations go on. So some benefits of mending the achievement gap. If the achievement gap was fixed, we'd see actually like major economic gains. This would also mitigate the cycle of poverty, which I just mentioned. So obviously allowing these people that live in low-income areas and people that are in poverty to have a way to get out of poverty. But overall, it would increase the GDP of the United States over the next few years, and it would increase tax revenue on both federal and local level. So according to a study that I looked at, This is projected to raise federal revenue by $4.1 trillion by the year 2050. This is if the achievement gap will close. And overall, the U.S. economy could grow by 5.8%. Put this into a more education-focused perspective. If the achievement gap was amended, the Education Department of the United States could afford to spend $198 billion annually on the Education Department and still break even on their budget over the next 37 years.
So like my friend Max mentioned before, the benefits are there and government also acknowledged this, and then they try to come up with different solutions. So one of the solutions being No Time Left Behind, NCLB, which was issued under the presidency of George W. Bush, and the goal is to close achievement gap. So it includes the standardized testing, and if the school doesn't make up to the standardized testing goal and they lose the funding from government, so that put really a lot of pressure on students and the teachers and schools because they have to teach according to the test and not really teaching the important skills like critical thinking, for example. So the students don't feel like they are encouraged to stay in the school longer. So they were eventually forced out of school. And then that also, of course, create the achievement gap, and achievement gap still exists. So under the presidency of Obama, he acknowledged this problem and he tried to repeal NCLB and replace this with every student succeed at ESSA. So it was effective during the academic year of 2017 and 2018. So it also includes the standardized testing from No Child Left Behind. The only difference now is that the federal accountability falls to the state because state knows better than federal. And also the school district, they can now apply for the sub-grant in addition to the funds that they get from the ESSA Title II Part 8 funding.
Another past solution was the Common Core curriculum. So this is still in place today. And it was heavily focused on standardized tests, just like NCLB and ESSA still are. And basically this encourages competition between the students and between schools, but it also kind of makes it so that teachers and students are completely measured by how they do on these tests. So that's pretty much what the government sees, is just the data and statistics they get back from these standardized tests, and that's how they measure the success of a school, especially before high school, as there's no graduation rates. And then this generally has led to a less holistic approach in the classroom. It's pretty much forced teachers to teach towards test instead of teaching towards real life, teaching towards college, doing something like this Catalyst program, for instance, instead of focused just on the standardized test and the students doing well on that standardized test. This was implemented in 2010, so it's still pretty early in its implementation. But many states have withdrawn from it as it was a state-led initiative, just like the SSA was. So it was up to the states on what they wanted to buy into this program and what they may have wanted to opt out of. And actually by 2016, over half the states have withdrawn from many of the standardized testing aspects of Common Core. And this was due to a lot of ground level actors, which would include like local parents, local educators, and local administrators who basically voiced their concerns saying that they don't think the standardized testing was the best way to achieve academic success for students and the best way to close the achievement gap.
So as Max said, that we found there is a connection between teacher retention rates and student success rates. So instead of focusing on funding and curriculum like the existing solutions did, we instead decided to focus on teacher retention. Initially, we looked at implementing teacher mentorship programs across the state. However, we found that that has already been done, but teacher retention issues are still prominent in the state of Wisconsin. So obviously these mentorship programs aren't doing their job. So we decided to look at the mentorship programs as they are and make recommendations to fix the guidelines for the program so we can have quality mentorship programs across the state of Wisconsin. So Wisconsin Law PI 34 is part of Wisconsin's Quality Educator Initiative, and this is the law that requires mentorship programs across the state. And what it says is that a district is required to provide a trained mentor for a teacher with a Tier 2 license. And what a Tier 2 license is a license for an educator that has less than 6 semesters of teaching experience. So the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction has a set of guidelines for induction programs for new teachers. It has 3 components, with the last component being a qualified and trained mentor for new educators. And what it says pretty much for this component of its guidelines is that a mentorship program should last 1 to 2 years. And then it also says that a mentor should be trained and have 3 years of teaching experience. And as you can see, these guidelines are pretty vague. So it gives a lot of loopholes for school districts in Wisconsin, which may be why our teacher retention rates in the state of Wisconsin aren't very good. So we decided to look at these guidelines and build on them and make them more structured so that we can ensure quality mentorship programs across the state in all school districts. So in building these recommendations, we talked to 2 urban districts in the state, West Dallas and Waukee Public School Districts, And then we talked to 3 rural districts that are near us, so Rosendale, Brandon, Ripon, and Berlin area school districts. And so that's how we came up with these recommendations. So the first recommendation is that a mentorship program should last 3 years instead of 1 to 2. All the schools we talked to, everyone had a 1-year mentorship program except for Rosendale, Brandon. So first year, we recommend a highly structured model. We know that Ripon and Rosendale, Brandon do this. So on the screen, you can see an example from Rosendale Brandon School District. This is for the month of September. And then this gives an idea of what a mentor and a mentee should cover within that first month of the school year. And so everything has to do with that first month. So grading scale, testing, assemblies, things like that. For the second year, we recommend pretty much what Rosendale Brandon actually does for their second year. So monthly meetings between a mentor and a mentee. Not very structured, just kind of casually getting together, talking about concerns and goals and overall comments. And then the third year is pretty much a mirror image of the second year, except bi-monthly meetings, just getting away from that structure. Our second recommendation is that a mentor should have 4 years of teaching experience. After going through our 3 years of mentoring, we believe they should have a year of independence where they aren't required to meet with their mentor, so they can get quality experience on their own and become a quality mentor. Our third recommendation has to do with mentor selection. So we believe that mentor selection should happen as soon as possible after a new teacher is hired. That way, the relationship between a mentor and a mentee can grow as quickly as possible or as soon as possible before the school year starts. We also believe that the administrators, principals, current teachers, and anyone part of the hiring process for that new teacher should be part of the mentor selection. And then we also believe that when picking a mentor for a new hire, things such as grade level, subject area, and then just overall compatibility should be taken into consideration. Our fourth recommendation is that administrators and principals should be involved in the mentorship programs. In our research, we found that a lot of teachers ended up leaving either their school or the profession because they felt a disconnect with administrators. They felt they couldn't communicate with them. So by having administrators and principals meet with new teachers, it opens up that communication pathway. So we recommend bi-monthly one-on-one meetings between a new teacher and a new principal for the first year. And then for the first year with administrators and new teachers, we believe that bi-monthly meetings as well, but a team of administrators with all the new teachers in the school district. And then our last recommendation is a community integration program. So the Berlin area school district actually started doing this a couple years ago, and they've been building on it. What they've been doing is during the service days before the school year starts, they take the teachers out into the community, and what they do is they introduce them to local business owners. They get to see what kind of community services and resources are available, so they get an idea of what they can do to connect their classroom to the community, and they can also better connect with their students because they get an idea of what kind of community their students are living in and what kind of things they can apply in their classroom in order to connect with their students better. So it would be ideal to implement this and just take all of our recommendations and show them at the DPI and say, here you go, we fixed this for you, but obviously that's not going to work. So the first thing to do would be to get schools to implement this right now and gather data from these schools, so things such as graduation rates, grade point average, test scores, and obviously teacher retention rates. And then also just take recommendations from these schools to better our recommendations for the guidelines so we can create a quality guideline set for the DPI and then present that to the Department of Public Instruction and say, here, we have data now, you should really change your guidelines so we can have quality mentorship programs across the entire state. And then looking at implementation district by district, every district is different. So when we were making these guidelines, we wanted them to be flexible. So every district is going to implement it differently in order to meet their goals and their needs. So the implementation should be a collaborative process between administrators, principals, current teachers, and community members where appropriate.
So like Brianna mentioned before, she said details about the implementing the mentorship program, but it all comes down to one question, how about the funding, what are the resources in need? So from the 3 school districts that we talked to, Berlin School District, Ripon School District, and Rosendale Brandon School District, we found out that there's like 2 ways of funding, which is ESSA Title 2x8 funding that I mentioned before, and also they can get the grant through peer review and mentoring grants. So Berlin and Rosendale Brandon School District, they use Title II Part A from ESSA, and then this funding is to increase the teacher quality. And to get this funding, the school should apply with a plan of action, and then annually they submit the performance reports about how these fundings are being used. For Ripon School District, they used to use peer review and mentoring grants, which was issued by Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. They no longer have this grant, so they are now using principal and administrators as their mentor. And without even school enough funding, the district is also maintaining the mentorship program through anything. So we still encourage the mentors to give their best and mentor the incoming teacher beyond these all incentives that were given.
So we wanted to weigh our pros and cons of our solution, and we decided that that was probably the best way to figure out what would be the best way to implement our solution. So looking over the cons first, as stated earlier, the most important aspect of our program is the pairing. It is essential that we make a solution that has a solid foundation of both collaborative development as well as communication to ensure that we don't stress out our teachers because they do have a very important job, as well as the school districts who are meant to educate the future generations. Therefore, making anything take away from that goal is going to be essential that we add to it instead of take away from it. And however, if we do implement this well, we'll have a higher teacher retention rate. So students can rely on their teachers more often. Even if you have a teacher once in a classroom, it's more likely that that student will go back to that teacher as another friendly face or someone they can utilize or count as a resource for later on in their institutional years, as well as it is also a voice for our teachers. As much as our school boards and our school administrators do, they don't necessarily know what goes on within our classrooms. So it is really important for the teachers to be able to be heard by their higher ups and be able to feel as important as they are to our society. The biggest pro, however, is it's going to positively impact the achievement gap, which many past solutions have either ignored or separated further by creating standardized tests that in reality just measure a student's success at one point without considering any other factors. So why will our solution work? Well, it's meant to tackle a big issue working from the ground up. Like a domino falling, it just takes a little time and an extra push and everything will fall well into place. Unlike the solutions implemented before, our proposed program is supposed to be flexible to fit any school district's needs, as well as stay in line with the guidelines that are required by our government that most schools do not do, at least in the urban school districts that we talk to, do not do. In addition, because there are grants that we mentioned earlier that could be utilized for mentoring, it's completely plausible and feasible that this program can be implemented in a school. And then once fully settled into our school districts, the education system can afford to spend more and eventually break even on their budget, as Max has stated earlier. All students should have the ability to succeed in school, as well as receive their diploma, no matter their ethnicity or economic standing. If we believe mentorship would work as well as we have done in our research, we feel that it is all of our responsibilities to try and put effort in to make this situation and this achievement gap stronger and less important for the future generations. Thank you.
All right, we have questions for our presenters.
So, oh boy. So you mentioned that it would take time to get these things actually implemented. So is there things that a teacher could do if they go to a school that doesn't have these to try to improve, I guess, their own retention?
Yeah, so the Rosendale Brandon School District, actually, their mentoring program a few years ago wasn't very good. And talking with their superintendent, he admitted that. And so actually some new teachers that went through their mentoring program decided that their mentoring program wasn't doing a very good job. So they approached the administration on their own, and they told them that this mentoring program needed to be fixed. And so they actually worked with the administration to fix the mentoring program in the Rosendale Brandon School District. And so being a new educator, you pretty much just need to take initiative and realize what you need and talk to your administrators and pretty much demand that the attention that you need.
So there's a correlation between teacher retention and this achievement gap. Is there evidence that there's a causal connection?
Well, in the research that I've looked at least, there wasn't anything that we could say, because there are so many factors of why teachers leave. So any of those could be a reason for why our retention is so high. I think to further study that, we'd actually need to do surveys with the teachers and ask specific reasons why they would leave, which would give more of a causal relationship. Currently, it's just correlational.
I can see why a mentorship program statewide would make better teachers in Wisconsin as a whole. I'm concerned that one of the challenges of the achievement gap is that better resource schools are able to offer higher salaries and bonuses to better teachers. How do you address the potential challenge here of low resource schools doing all the work to produce good teachers through quality mentorship programs who then get poached by the schools that are already doing well?
So I talked with teachers that are in, they were minority low-income schools within Milwaukee, and when I asked them what they said about their resources, they said the main reason that they do leave the school is because they don't feel supported. It was less of we didn't have resources, it was more that they don't listen to us when we have these complaints. So using this mentorship will at least create that connection between both the school administrators and the school board with the teachers. So because support was the main problem that they had, at least in the urban school districts.
Yeah, we found that to be pretty much nationwide true, that the main reason why teachers leave the profession, especially they teach for a year and then leave immediately, is because they just feel no support. They are new to their job, they're trying to manage a class, they just got out of college, and they're doing this and they're maybe asking for support and not receiving it. And they're basically saying, well, if I'm not gonna get this support, I'm not gonna stick around. Whereas they're not really complaining about the resources. They feel like they have that. They just need some back and forth. They need that administrators work back and forth a little bit more with them instead of kind of just saying, well, here's your resources. You should be doing better. That's what we found more nationwide, and especially true in Wisconsin.
And then also in some of our research, we found that even though the United States puts a crap ton of money into education, even though we have a lot of resources in these schools, there's still a huge achievement gap. So these resources haven't really been closing the achievement gap like we thought they would be. So we didn't really want to focus so much on the monetary aspect of it because we didn't see any significant evidence that showed that more money meant better grades or better test scores.
Other questions?
Thank you for your talk. Could you expand on the qualities that makes a successful and quality mentor-mentee relationship?
So a quality mentor-mentee relationship would be having open communication and just a level of acceptance between the mentor and mentee, because obviously they're not going to agree on everything. Everyone has their different ideas, and if the mentor is a certain amount of years out of school, that new hire is going to come out with new ideas. We can talk to them, like, this is what they taught me at school, where the older educator will be like, well, no, this is what I was taught. So in order to, being able to communicate and to accept their differences is going to be a huge part of having a quality mentor-mentee relationship.
In addition, we've also discussed doing things such as compatibility tests to make sure that your mentor and mentee do have the best qualities that would mesh well together. And past mentorship programs basically force their mentor upon the mentee a day before the school starts. And we don't think that's a proper way to get a good relationship started. So we'd start as early as possible, kind of like our tutoring program we have here. The earlier you get that start, the better it is later on in the process. So it's along the same lines of that.
There are also classes that are offered at many of the UW schools. I know Whitewater did this for a long time, where they basically offer classes on how to be an effective mentor, and that the credits that you earn from those classes can be used for graduate school and other things. Obviously, they help you with being a mentor, but they can go towards maybe getting a graduate degree or possibly using those credits to raise your teacher salary along the teacher pay scale. So there are benefits to being a mentor aside from just, helping a fellow teacher out. There are some salary benefits depending on the district, of course. Everything's very different district to district.
Right, thanks everybody for all of your questions. Thanks all of you for tuning in online, and again, thank all of you who have come today to hear these talks. Let's give a round of applause, and our next talk. Our next talk will start at 9:15. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't know that you were What was the initial parent? Not really, it just wasn't straight in the future, maybe it Thank you. We lived down the street, and for whatever reason, it was do you think that do you think we know enough to prevent stuff like this, or do we think that we have some learning to do? Just being honest, tell me what you think. Because I'm convinced lost because I have to be less than you. That's really fine. Yeah. I said this morning, it's fine. I don't think that's okay. Thanks. Thanks a lot for being here. Yeah, it was a long day last night, probably. I don't have time. Okay.
I don't know. I'm like football man. Right away. Honestly, I would first, but if you know it is wrong, yeah, this is a great man. I mean, I'm gonna try to figure out if I don't have a.
Let me see.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third of our Catalyst Day presentations from our Catalyst 300 Applied Innovation Seminar students. Again, these are students working on real-world problems, coming up with applied innovations and inventive solutions. So our next group will present on Taste It, Don't Waste It, addressing food insecurity and waste in Milwaukee.
Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about food waste and food insecurity in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I am Hannah Rail, and this is Chris Hittner, Kayla Forlano, Michelle Cook, and Austin Bunders. According to Action Against Hunger, which is a global organization attempting to combat hunger within the world, there are 815 million people in the world that go hungry each year. This goes against what they say, that there's enough food in the world to feed everyone. If there's enough food in the world, why are people still going hungry? Milwaukee, Wisconsin is not exempt from this issue. We decided to focus on Milwaukee, Wisconsin because there are students here on the Ripon College campus that call Milwaukee home. Not only that, but Milwaukee is kind of close to us. It affects other people around us that aren't necessarily from the Ripon College campus, which makes this issue significant to people like us. Milwaukee has high rates of poverty. These high rates of poverty are what lead to a high food insecurity rate and high rates of hunger. According to Wheeler and Braun, the definition of food insecurity is not having proper access, availability, or utilization of food, or it's an inadequate food system stability. This 2010 image from the Hunger Task Force attempts to show the hunger population in Milwaukee. In 2010, the Milwaukee population was roughly 600,000 people, and this 156,000 picture before you is the 26% of the population that is below the poverty line, hence showing the amount of hunger in Milwaukee. The report that this image comes from is a supplement to the 2016 Wisconsin Poverty Report. This report, according to Smeating and Thornton, takes into account something we call the Wisconsin Poverty Measure. The Wisconsin Poverty Measure takes into account certain differences across Wisconsin that something like the federal Supplemental Poverty Measure does not take into account. That is why we chose to take information from this report instead of something else, because we wanted to know those differences within Wisconsin. The 4th Congressional District, of which Milwaukee is part of, is pictured here in red. The 4th Congressional District has a nearly 10% higher food insecurity rate than any other district. The 4th Congressional District's food insecurity rate is 22%. The next highest district's food insecurity rate is 12%. This translates into 70,000 more food insecure people in the 4th Congressional District than the next highest district. Based on all of this numerical data I have just shared with you, we see that there is an issue of hunger in Milwaukee.
and my group wishes to address it as best we can.
So the first solution that we are using to address food insecurity is the SNAP program, which stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. The program was created in 1964 in New York by the United States Department of Agriculture. The two biggest contributors were Henry Wallace, who was the Secretary of Agriculture, and Milo Perkins, who was the program's first administrator. The purpose of this program is to help families and independent people financially. This is done by giving an allocation of money every month to the people that need the extra help. This is in the hopes that any alternative forms of income will go towards other necessities such as gas and rent. Although there are specific foods that are and are not allowed to be bought on the SNAP program, there are foods from each of the major food groups available to people. According to the USDA Food and Nutrition Service, in the span of about a month, the SNAP program helps roughly 40 million people across the US. Although this program has done a lot of good for many people, there are still some issues with it. It does not address the larger issue of food prices being too high for people to afford. It just gives people an alternative way to afford these prices. And also, in order for families to benefit, they need to live in an area where SNAP is accessible to them or have the means to get to a store that allows SNAP. And lastly, not everybody who needs financial help meets the criteria to be eligible. Our second solution we used as a model is a company called Imperfect Produce. It was first created in 2015 in California by a man named Ben Simon. And since then, it has expanded to Portland, Seattle, Indianapolis, Chicago, and Milwaukee. The purpose of this program is to buy foods from farmers that otherwise would not make it off of the farm due to the visual appearance of the food. The food is not rotten or distasteful in any way, it just looks abnormal. After this company purchases the food, it is packaged up in bread boxes and they're sold on their website at a 30% discount from the retail price. The food that doesn't sell is donated to local food banks and homeless shelters in that area. Without organizations like this one, farmers would waste up to 20% of all of their crop. And according to their official website, Imperfect Produce alone has helped save roughly 40 million pounds of food since their start just 4 years ago. Some issues with this solution include it being an online store, which limits its availability to people who have internet access and access to a debit or credit card. Another issue are, again, their prices. Although the food is discounted, people have to buy the larger boxes. There's no option for them to buy a smaller box at a lower price. The final solution we modeled after was proposed by a man named Matthew Desmond. After he performed extensive ethnographic research and collection of both quantitative and qualitative data, which can be found in his book, Evicted, he suggested a universal voucher program for families whose income falls below a certain level. The voucher would be able to be used to find housing anywhere. This program has been implemented in some European countries and has shown success. A program like this would help to decrease homelessness, poverty, and as a result, decrease hunger.
After looking into programs such as Imperfect Produce and SNAP, which have taken different approaches to combating food waste and insecurity, we designed a nonprofit company to address these issues in Milwaukee. The first part of our plan involves purchasing or receiving donations from farms of their imperfect or unmarketable produce that would otherwise go to waste or be used for animal feed. We will prioritize purchasing from local and sustainable farms to encourage and support these practices. However, during non-growing seasons or simply to keep up with demand, we will expand our range of purchasing outwards with the model of as local and as sustainable as possible. We will also receive donations from grocery stores of produce that they are unable to sell, but that is still of high quality. To transport the products, we will use a transportation company that has good hiring practices, and we will transport our produce to a main location. We will choose this location between Milwaukee City Central and Milwaukee City South Central because, as you can see, there are very high rates of poverty in these areas. Ideally, our location will also be near public transportation to increase the accessibility of our store, and our location will be renovated to include both a storage area for the produce as well as a store section. The store section will include a typical grocery store style portion where customers can purchase produce from a wide variety. It will also include a box selection section, which is similar to Imperfect Produce, where customers can buy the produce in bulk, which might be useful for families or for individuals who do not have time to shop through the grocery store. We will be selling the produce at about 1/3 or 33% of the market price, and those who are eligible for SNAP will be able to use their benefits to purchase our produce. However, since having just one location will likely still be inaccessible for many, we will also contract out with local businesses in the area where people may typically shop for food, such as small stores or gas stations, but that do not have inexpensive produce available. This will help increase the accessibility of healthy food options for those who shop within the community. We will also require these businesses to sell the produce at about 33% of market price, and we will sell it to them at about half that, so 16 or 17% of market price, and provide transportation costs. So they will have a guaranteed profit margin, but the prices will still be able to be kept low. And SNAP will also be able to use at these other locations we contract out with. Finally, we hope to work closely with the community, not only through business partnerships, but for leaders and workers at our facility. This will once again help stimulate the local economy and hopefully provide more individuals and families with sources of incomes, which is working towards our ultimate goal of improving healthy life outcomes.
All right, so now I'm going to kind of talk about why we believe that our solution is going to be more innovative and more successful than the previous mentioned solutions, specifically focusing on imperfect produce. So for starters, we're mostly focused on low socioeconomic status people. Imperfect produce is more focused on middle-class people or more affluent people. And this is due to their price point. Everything is online. They don't have anything in store. It's all delivery. And also, people have to have a debit card or a credit card to be able to purchase this. Where people with low socioeconomic status might not have as easy access to internet, they might not have debit or credit card to purchase things online, and in some cases they may not even have an address to have this food delivered to. Then we're also looking to create jobs with our program, being located in Milwaukee City Central and Milwaukee City South Central. That is a very high poverty area, and by increasing jobs there, we're going to be able to let them have more income, be able to purchase things such as their produce or even more housing and other things like that. Then for resources, the big resource that we're going to need is grants. And to do that, we're looking into the Farm Bill. With the Farm Bill, there's three main areas in which we looked at. The first one is the CFP, which is the Community Food Projects, and they have a $5 million yearly budget. Then the FINI is the Food Insecurity Nutrition Incentives, which is now called the Josef Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program. And they have $45 million for 2019, and this increases $5 million every year up until 2023, where it'll be worth $65 million, and that will be available onward. And then the last part is the E&T pilot projects, which stands for employment and training. So by looking to hire people in this area, we believe we qualify for this, where there is $92.5 million available for 2019 and 20 for 8 pilot projects, which is new to the Farm Bill. And then just for E&T programs in general, there's a budget of $90 million for 2019, $250 million for 2020, and $1 billion for each year thereafter. So there definitely is a lot of money out there that we would look to apply for in order to help initially fund our project. And then transportation as well. Transportation is the other main resource that we are looking to do. We're looking to outsource this, being able to find a company that can get the food from the farms and deliver it to us, as well as to outsource it to the local area grocery stores. Then some of our possible limitations. The one could be total cost. We did find a building between Milwaukee City Central and Milwaukee City South Central that costs $500,000. However, we would have to do improvements and renovations to this in order to bring it up to standards to be a warehouse and be able to be a grocery store with housing all this produce. So we're not as sure what that cost would entail. However, with all of the funding that is available through the Farm Bill, we believe that money will be able to more than offset that cost. And then accessibility via price point. Like we mentioned before, imperfect produce only has a 30% markdown. However, we're doing a 67% markdown, but this could still be a problem for some people of low socioeconomic status. But we believe that having such a low price point will be beneficial to them, and a lot of people will be able to benefit from them, in addition to being able to continually use their SNAP benefits. And then grocery stores being resistant. Since it is such a low price point, some of these grocery stores may not want to house it since they're not going to have as big of a profit margin. However, having this produce in their store should increase foot traffic or in these neighborhoods and increase purchasing of other materials or other products within their stores. And then degree of success. There's not many other programs such as ours that are exactly the same, so we're not sure how far reaching we will be able to reach, but being located in this area and all the other things involved, we do believe that we will be able to reach a large amount of people.
All right, and then talking in terms of success, how we think we'll be successful and what we define success within our solution. So obviously addressing the big problem of food insecurity and addressing it within the aspects that affect food insecurity and our byproducts of food insecurity. So the first thing being food waste. According to the USDA, 30 to 40% of food is wasted post-harvest. So that's food after it's being shipped off of the farms is being wasted, as well as 20 to 30% of food doesn't even make it off the farm, whether it's being put back into the ground or used as animal feed or other types of things that the farmers would use it for. As far as the economy, we are trying to lower the price point of produce, which is more or less the more expensive food within grocery stores. So lowering that price point allows people of low SES status to pay for other things that they also need besides food. And then moving into the health benefits as well with our solution is that we are providing healthy food that is not, again, it's not food that should not be eaten. It's still good food that is nutritious for you versus any food that we could get that could be processed or not as healthy as fresh produce from farms. Again, so our success can contribute to reducing rates of food insecurity by increasing the accessibility of food to people who could not otherwise afford food or have the means to travel to go get food from the regular grocery store within their area. So after our success is achieved, we want to branch outside of Milwaukee. We believe that we have set ourselves up by placing ourselves in the 2 most impoverished and highest rates of food insecurity in Milwaukee. So our location is very important to us, as well as the community impact that we have, so that we have the community behind us, so that we can branch outside of Milwaukee, show our success, and move on to other parts of the state and the country. So how we're going to prove that we are successful, we have looked into qualitative surveys that we would do inside of the store, mainly paper and pen format that they could fill out while they are being checked out in the store or at a station right as you leave, as well as you could take the form home and bring it back with you at any time, just so it's providing the most feedback for us as well as the most accessible for these people. And then we were also looking at, we can measure how many people come into our store, so we can see just the amount of people that we are affecting through our solution, as well as looking at the amount of produce that we are taking in, as well as distributing to others, so we can look at how much food is coming in and going out. And then again, we're going to compare the benchmark goals of food insecurity. So right now in Milwaukee, it's currently 22%. We want to reduce that about 50%. We don't exactly know the X amount of years it will take to do that. So again, we're going to use the tests that are already in place to do this and measure this on a yearly basis to see where we're at in the coming years. We're going to do the same thing again for food waste. So we want to reduce food waste at the farming level as well as the post-harvest level. So again, we'll be using the same exact tests that are in place to already measure these statistics, and again, trying to reduce them, measure them on a year-to-year basis. As far as the economic impact, again, we're trying to reduce the cost of healthy food, which is otherwise the most expensive food. This is going to save people money on food so that they can allocate that money that they have to other things such as medications, vehicles, and their house payment. Finally, the health of the community, as you can see on this slide, this next slide here. Here in Wisconsin, in America, we are known for our poor eating habits, high rates of obesity, as you can see, and just low access to healthy food. So as you can see from the graph on the left, the percent to no access to healthy food is approximately 60% for low SES people. So that means 40% of people within this category have access to healthy, nutritious food, compared to middle class, which is 30% have no access to food, so 70% do have access to it, and so on. As well as the obesity rate is higher for lower SES people, being approximately 35%. So again, we have the health benefits of being produce-based and the impacts that we have with that. All right, that's all we have. Thank you very much. We will now take your questions.
All right, thank you. Questions? We have a microphone ready for you.
As someone who's come from Milwaukee and knowing it's one of the most segregated cities in the area, much of our homeless are within those areas that don't have access to SNAP. Is there anything in your program that would allow the homeless also to have that healthier option?
Yeah, so the big thing is that SNAP is an alternative point, so people who have SNAP also can just use that as an option to pay for it. Our price point, again, is so low compared to other stores that's increasing the accessibility for these people. So while SNAP isn't the only way to pay for the food, you can also just use regular money. So it's not completely just apply for people with SNAP, it's for everyone in the community.
Thank you for your presentation. I like the component of eliminating some of the waste that happens with our produce. However, one of your measures of success was a change in healthy eating habits. And I think some of the eating habits are ingrained in the culture. And I'm wondering if you've thought of an education component that would help people use the more healthy foods, and also the fact help them use them efficiently, because many of the people who most need the healthy foods are just scrambling to stay alive and go to work and take care of their children, and they may not have time, or think they don't have time to prepare them.
So yeah, that's a very good point. We did, starting out thinking about this problem, we did think about an educational plan and how we would do that. We thought we could, like, people are aware of the health problems in America, so we didn't think an education plan would be more beneficial than our program. However, we did think that maybe through our advertisement of our store and our program that we could include the health benefits of eating produce and having healthier eating habits in that way. But that's why we are better than maybe past solutions or just buying from a grocery store.
So you guys just mentioned like the education, like the point of view, like just like to promote your like the program you have. So you guys also mentioned like to branching out like your like different stores. So, and also you mentioned like the non-profit. So for a non-profit, it's like really important like to make alliances. So are you looking into like alliances or like partnering with other like non-profits or like any other companies to promote like your education, like whatever like goal you want to achieve?
In regards to like nonprofits, I think we're thinking about doing with Hungry Harvest or the Hungry Task Force in Milwaukee. They're a nonprofit that kind of works in Milwaukee that does this type of thing. So we're definitely looking to that. The big thing with branching out to the grocery stores is trying to increase the accessibility. Having just our one location, main location with the warehouse, grocery stores kind of like our main hub. But by increasing our accessibility to other grocery stores, we're looking to increase the accessibility as well for low SES people.
So a lot of times with grocery stores, they have food waste, which is the produce that doesn't get sold in time to be continued to be put on the shelf. Did you have a plan for what you would do with your like wasted produce?
For one of our the solutions we looked at in Perfect Produce, they donate their produce. I think that's what we were talking about. We were going to donate to any homeless shelters or food banks in the local area so that our produce did not go to waste.
I think we have time for one more question. All right, seeing none, please join me in thanking our group. all for being here, and our next talk will begin at 9:45.
I was like, hey, thank you, Brad. Yeah, but it's his mom. What? Stop! Are you taking a video? No, it's great. It's great. It's great. You're fine. I'm not for a while. Right. Oh, it's so much fun. Why? Like some water. No. I was gonna say, yeah. I'm sorry. They don't have much activity. Just on. I have to say that one of you is on that. You're okay. Can one of you just, Professor Lamb will come get one of the handouts for the Q&A. Yeah. And then if you want to answer, just use the field. Or pass the handouts. You guys can share one. Yeah. I'm on the end, so I can give it to him. I'll tell him. You're on for a second. Oh my gosh. I'm shaking so bad. Does my voice change? No, I'm really good. I'm freaking out. I'm not throwing up. Then we can get the panels. I don't know. What actually happens if I pass out? Someone covered my part. And I have to catch you.
All right, let's go, baby. You got this.
Like walk over there, like what's going on? I don't know. They give us no direction. We're now at the podium. I know. I'm gonna break it. I feel bad for whoever has to. I'm just glad there's a break after this, so I can go take it. They're like slippery up. There's a break after us. We'll try it off. Oh, cool.
Get through this. Got about 3 minutes right now.
You stuck to yourself. Are you getting paid fake though? This is right.
Oh, you guys are close to go.
Yeah, I'll go after. How was like
shaky that. I don't think someone can. I don't think someone can go something out.
I know. Don't you know what the process is? I'm so
Talk about maybe 3 minutes.
I guess is it like inclusive or like I know. Material that like
Good morning again, and welcome to all of our guests online and to everyone here in Great Hall at Ripon College. Glad to have you with us for Catalyst Day presentations from our Catalyst 300 Applied Innovation Seminar students. Our next talk is going to be Youth Mental Health Education. Please join me in welcoming our next group.
Welcome. Thanks for coming to our presentation. Like she said, our group is doing youth mental health education. I'm Kyle, this is Logan, Naomi, Savannah, and Abby. We're focused on youth mental health because of the growing issue of mental health in the United States. One case of this is that since 2006, there's been a 7% increase in suicide rates in the ages 5 to 24. The reason this has to do with mental health is because 90% of people that commit suicide had some sort of mental health issue beforehand. The reason we focused on youth rather than everyone is because 50% of all lifetime cases of mental illness begin by the age of 14 and 75% by the age of 24. So the two kind of forms of mental health that we thought were like the most common in our youth were anxiety and depression. And last year alone, 4.4 million people ages 3 through 17 in the United States were diagnosed with anxiety and 1.9 million with depression. So we thought that the best way to deal with this was with early intervention. So we're going to implement a K through 8 mental health curriculum in schools.
So we looked at two past solutions to help us create our current curriculum, one of which is the Wisconsin Pyramid Model. This is a program that has been implemented in Wisconsin over the past few years for children aged 0 to 6. This program began when the WDPI, Department of Public Instruction, was given a 2-year grant to do some sort of early intervention mental health program. So this program focuses specifically on successful coping mechanisms, social skills, decreasing challenging behavior, and building self-confidence within our young children. This is really important because it's helped in classrooms to decrease challenging behavior. Teachers can spend more time getting to know their students. We'll be using a part of this in our current K through 8 curriculum.
Another past solution we looked at is from the state of New York. Their state education department passed a bill in July implementing a mental health curriculum throughout the entire school. So they implemented it in September, and the 3 things they focus on are self-management, relationships, and resource management. And we did look at this framework and look at some of their student learning goals and implement them into our solution. One downfall of this solution is that it hasn't even been implemented for an entire school year yet, so we don't really know the outcomes. We're hopeful that their solutions will also work for us.
So our solution is a K-8 mental health educational program, and we'll be proposing to implement it throughout all public schools throughout the state of Wisconsin. So as of right now, there's no set mental health curriculum, and we want to kind of get everybody on the same page. So that would include teacher trainings as well as a K-8 mental health curriculum. Parental assemblies and forums to address any concerns, and then committees that would be formed for the initial adaptation of the program as well as reevaluation after each year, and then survey and data tracking to track our program outcomes. And so the first part of that is that teacher and administrative training. And so with that, the developed a set of teacher learning goals as well as student learning goals divided up by each section of the curriculum, as you'll see later on. So our teacher learning goals are first and foremost identifying the signs and symptoms of mental illnesses, and then helping students reach the proper resources, as well as helping students develop their self-esteem, and then also improving the communication between the parents, the teachers, and the students, and then developing check-ins, and then maintaining a trauma-sensitive classroom. So this trauma-sensitive classroom was the main focus of this book that was written by a mental health professional and a principal, so they have a lot of experience dealing with mental health issues in these younger grade levels. And so the trauma-sensitive classroom is essentially just teachers being aware of what's going on. It's just essentially having teachers being aware of possible stressors in a student's life. And so toxic stress over a long period of time can harm a developing brain. And so this manifests as a mental illness. And this, this trauma-sensitive classroom would just be making sure that teachers are aware of this, and then managing the stress and the fears and assumptions of the students, as well as developing their strength and potential. So it wouldn't be taking the accountability away from the students, but it'd still be holding to that high academic standard, but it'd be making sure that teachers are aware of other things. So it's just really increasing that communication. And so as you can see, this checks off maintaining a trauma-sensitive classroom, of course, as well as improving communication, and then developing a student's self-esteem. And then in addition to traditional trainings, we want to incorporate cognitive trainings. So these are online simulation-based trainings. And so we would be purchasing for our program at-risk for elementary school and then at-risk for middle school educators, as those kind of fall within the grade levels of our program. And so these help teachers learn how to identify signs and symptoms. It helps them learn how to access proper resources and to guide students to proper resources. And then the biggest draw of it is that they're simulation-based. So teachers will get experience starting what can be sometimes difficult conversations. And so that way, teachers will be more willing to reach out to students, and they'll be more effective when they do reach out to students. So you can see this checks off identifying the signs and symptoms, as well as helping the students access the proper resources, and then finally, once again, improving that communication.
So back to the Wisconsin Pyramid Model, we are going to be adapting part of this program into our own kindergarten curriculum. So from all of the pyramid model, like we said, it's from children age 0 to 6. We really only need that 5 to 6 age range. So we'll be using the parts of the curriculum that focus on self-confidence, curiosity, motivation, persistence, and self-control, as well as helping students demonstrate identity and positive self-image. So it's really hard to track this sort of program because our participants are so young, but legislators that have been working on this project have noticed some trackable successes in these specific fields, and that's why we're going to be focusing on these aspects of the pyramid model. Also, because we already have funding for it, it's easy to expand this program. Currently, 26 schools have it, so we would like to implement this in all schools that have a kindergarten age range and class.
And so as we move into the elementary school curriculum, we'll start introducing some more of those mental health topics. And so with that, we want them to learn upstairs versus downstairs brain, and then also the interaction between physical, social, and emotional wellness, and then develop short-term and long-term coping strategies, and then learn how stressors affect different individuals differently. And so this upstairs versus downstairs brain is actually something that was mentioned by multiple mental health professionals. And so when you're under a period of stress, you're using the limbic system of your brain. So that's the part that processes emotion and that fight or flight response. And then when you're learning, you want to be using your prefrontal cortex, because that's kind of the higher functioning part. We can't really sit down, first graders, and talk about different parts of the brain. And so that's why we're going to use upstairs brain, which would be that prefrontal cortex, and downstairs brain, which would be that limbic system. And that allows students to visualize kind of what mental state they're in, so they can kind of move in between it. And then additionally, if they're having trouble articulating that, they can also use hand signals. So this is upstairs brain, this is downstairs brain. And so this kind of allows them to take control of what they're feeling, because sometimes emotions, especially at that young of an age, can be overwhelming. And so this would check off learning the upstairs versus downstairs brain, as well as using short-term management techniques. And then as we move on throughout the grade levels, we want to incorporate more stress management techniques, so that's stuff like breathing exercises, yoga poses such as the one seen above, as well as awareness exercises and self-care lessons. And this is so our students develop healthy habits from a young age, so as they grow up and encounter more stressors, they don't turn to negative habits. And so this is checking off exploring that connection between physical and especially emotional wellness, as well as using long-term strategies and identifying stressors and how they affect different individuals.
So another thing we want to implement into this elementary school curriculum is the Iris the Dragon book series. This book series covers different topics within mental health, such as ADHD, anxiety disorder, Asperger's syndromes, and bipolar disorder. They also have a book in the series that focuses on red flags and warning signs within children with mental health issues, and this can help not only the teachers and administrators, but the students to recognize these signs and symptoms within themselves. Along with the books, they also have other supplemental materials, not only for teachers, but for students. They have activities and games, as well as other materials that the teachers can use to teach this. So, and then this checks off the long-term and short-term strategies for managing feelings.
All right, so our middle school curriculum is going to be based off of Wisconsin Virtual School. It's going to be 3 classes, which are going to be implemented into our previous health classes. So to start off with, 6th grade is going to be more just the normal traditional health class with a little bit of mental health units, and these units are going to be stress management and relationship management. And then once we go to the 7th grade class, it's going to be about 50-50 from mental health and health. And some of these units are going to be coping mechanisms and social and media factors. And then when we go to 8th grade, it is going to be pretty much all mental health and not really any just normal health class. These units are going to be about anxiety, depression, adolescent development, and substance abuse.
So the student learning goals for middle school, first one is more narrow understanding of anxiety and depression. We want these kids to learn the signs and symptoms not only in themselves, but with classmates as well. And this will go into the second one, having knowledge of proper facilities and mentors to go to. If they know the signs and symptoms of anxiety and depression, they can go to the proper mentors and get help to get to the proper facilities that they need to go to. Knowledge of substance abuse and its correspondence with mental health. Many people who have substance abuse issues also have a mental health issue, and understanding the signs and symptoms of substance abuse can help lead them to get to the proper facilities as stated before. Understanding that getting help is not something to be ashamed of. A lot of people have this negative stigma with mental health. We want to erase that by allowing people who have mental health to get help that they need. And then lastly, build positive self-esteem and interactions with fellow students. By having a positive self-esteem, this will help them decrease their chances of mental health, and interact with students will help other students decrease their chances of mental health as well.
So one really big important part of this whole program is parental involvement. We want our parents to be able to be involved at every single stage of this process because it is their children that it is directly impacting. So as we mentioned earlier, we'd like to have some sort of parental assembly or school board / town hall style meeting. This will be a place for parents to ask questions and get answers to their questions, express their comments and concerns about the program, and also help plan and implement different parts of the program as well. We want a parent board from the beginning that will help create the general curriculum in their schools, as well as parents to come help along the whole process, because we believe that it is very important to be transparent in this whole process. These are touchy subjects that we're going to be talking to children about, and we want parents to know what their children are being taught, as well as have resources to help deal with these if their kids come home with comments, questions, or concerns to them.
And so when developing our solution, there was a couple things that we had to consider. And the first of that was, of course, the potential barriers to implementing our solution. So kind of together is legislative approval as well as funding. And so the current governor of Wisconsin was actually formerly the state's superintendent. And so not only does he have experience with education, but he actually has proposed a budget that we will be going over later that is looking to allocate resources towards mental health education and programs. And that shows that the government's actually already ready and willing to start dedicating resources towards a program like ours even before we proposed it. So we're actually not anticipating that this would be a large barrier to our project. Also, there could be some resistance from the school or school district level. So teachers could be kind of resistant toward adding in additional trainings, or schools could be kind of hesitant towards adding in additional information into what some could claim an already full curriculum. But past solutions such as the Wisconsin Pyramid Model or the New York Plan have shown that trainings are manageable and that there's space in the curriculum for what we believe to be very vital topics. And then finally, the other barrier that we could encounter is parental approval, as mentioned. And this is kind of the area we have the least control over. And so there could be some parents that are a little bit hesitant, as mentioned, about treating or talking about mental health issues. And so we would address those concerns. We would address those concerns with forums and then committees, as mentioned before. And then on the other side, there could be parents that are a little bit hesitant towards actually believing that mental health issues are real issues. And so when their students and their children come to them with concerns, they won't necessarily be willing to help them access the proper resources that they need for help. We can't necessarily control that, but the beauty of our program is that students are required to go to school, and all of the teachers and administration that they are interacting with each day will be trained in mental health issues, and they will understand the signs and symptoms. They will know where to guide the students. So students will still have an authoritative outlet that they can reach out to for help. And then when looking at the potential impact of our program, we see that students will be on the receiving end of the mental health curriculum. Teachers will be receiving the mental health training. Parents will hopefully be getting involved through our forums and assemblies. And then the schools and school districts would be involved in the actual design of the curriculum as well as the implementation of the program. And then the government, and specifically the Department of Public Instruction, will be involved in kind of passing our solution. And finally, we're expecting to see positive societal impacts with our program. So because we are addressing the problem that we saw at such a young age, all of these children will grow up with a better understanding and awareness of mental health issues. And so that means that as these generations grow up, a greater part of the population within Wisconsin will be more aware of these issues, and hopefully that will kind of destigmatize mental health issues overall.
So as we mentioned earlier, we do have a proposed budget for this program. So the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction requested $31,946,300 for youth mental health education programs. The governor proposed just $150,000 less than that, so that's real close to what would actually be needed. A majority of this budget would go towards purchasing those programs, such as the Cognito trainings, the books, and other training materials that we might find work very well along the way. Another large portion of this is going to go towards furthering education. So if teachers decide to do those additional Cognito programs, go to conferences, or find other methods of training, they can be sponsored by the state to go do that. $150,000 of this budget is to go towards survey and data tracking, which we'll be talking about momentarily. This is a really important aspect of this program. And then a lump sum of money was set aside to give to Children's Hospital of Wisconsin for anti-bullying and mental health resources. And recently, Cole's Foundation donated $5 million to Children's Hospital of Wisconsin for this specific program. So we now have extra money in our budget that we can allocate towards other places that will really help us grow this program. We can save it and use it in the future when we find things that we need to add, but it's really important that we have this extra wiggle room in our budget so we can change and improve our program as time goes on.
And so as mentioned, we have that $150,000 that's going to be set aside for a statewide survey. And so we would use that, first of all, in the initial design of our program, and to kind of make sure that we're tailoring our program to specific issues. So if all of Wisconsin or one part of Wisconsin is experiencing one high rate of one specific type of mental health issue, then we will make sure that we address that so that everybody's receiving the education that they need. And then we'll also use it in the reevaluation to kind of track our program outcomes. So we'll look at suicide rates, rates of undiagnosed mental illnesses, and then untreated mental illnesses. And so should our program be successful, we would expect that over time we'd see a decrease in these rates. Finally, we looked at the sustainability of our project. So because our project is not being funded by a one-time donation, but it's actually coming from a budget that has been already proposed before we even proposed our project, we're expecting that we would receive long-term funding. And so that would kind of not be a barrier towards this program existing for a long period of time. And then additionally, as kind of mentioned before, we have committees that will be a great asset towards the sustainability of our project, because these committees will be first and foremost involved in the initial design and actual curriculum decisions. And so we would take mental health professionals, teachers, administrators, parents, and we would have them all kind of get together and decide what exactly would be taught. And so they'd be able to incorporate past successes. They'd be able to avoid past failures, and that would kind of give us a higher likelihood of success even in that first year of implementation. And then in addition to that, we will also use qualitative feedback we receive from these people as well as the quantitative feedback from our surveys to kind of reevaluate our program each year to make sure it's addressing the concerns, make sure it's staying up to date in the research surrounding these topics, and make sure that our program is the most effective it can be at teaching parents, teachers, and most of all students these important mental health issues. So are there any questions?
Right, questions from the audience? Let's see, a couple.
Thank you for your presentation. A lot of teachers and administration are kind of hesitant to talk about a student's mental health issues, and so if they see something in the classroom, they might be hesitant to come out and say, your child is dealing with this or this. How do you kind of break down that barrier? Because there's a lot of legal issues that go along with that, with your curriculum.
Yeah, so that's why we're talking about incorporating that cognito training, because that's actually, it provides the simulations where like they have a student in the classroom, so they have to work towards starting that conversation in like an effective way and like in a way that's like as sensitive as possible. So that's why we would use that sort of training so that they kind of get experience doing it beforehand, so that when they do reach out, they kind of don't encounter any barriers and they're kind of more effective when they do.
I really enjoyed that. Though as you were presenting it, constantly asking, why is this a problem? You did a very good job of showing why it's a problem in terms of high anxiety rates, depression, suicide in youth. But why is that the case? So we found out that youth cancer rates suddenly spiked. We tried solving that by having chemo for kids and radiation for runs. We also asked what kind of environmental causes are there that lead to this increase in cancer. So do you have any sense in your research of why youth anxiety, depression, and suicide rate might be up? Because that sort of identification of fundamental problem might be in some ways more important than only treatment symptoms. Thank you.
So one thing I've seen over research is really the spike in social media and internet usage. Children are on these online forums, they're on Instagram and Facebook, and they're comparing themselves to things that they're seeing. And this is really lowering their self-worth, it's self-deprecating, and while this isn't the only cause, there's lots of stuff that could be causing it. This is one of the really big things. And because this is its own kind of world and community and children are off on their own, it's impacting them. They're not really talking to like their parents or other adults about it because they don't think that they'll understand. And so with the increase in, and I'm sure there's specific numbers and I don't know off the top of my head, with the increased usage of social media and the internet, it's really started to take a toll on children and youth because this is something that they've had their entire life, and so they're just kind of used to it, and it's a big problem.
So you talked about having teachers recognize like symptoms of mental illnesses in kids and then like implementing intervention. A lot of times with diagnosing these disorders, especially ADHD in schools, they don't have the proper like neuropsychological tests to diagnose these disorders. Did you have any way to combat that, or any specific ways to get them to a neuropsychologist to get properly diagnosed?
That wasn't something that we were really considering. We were kind of focusing more on just the awareness and educational aspect, but it's definitely something that if we implement this and it is successful, we can start incorporating more of that. So we're just kind of doing one step at a time, I guess.
Any additional questions? All right. Please join me in thanking our group. Again, thank you all for being here and participating in the Catalyst Day presentations. We're now going to have a break, and our next talk will begin at 10:30. So please help yourself to coffee or
Well, those mic issues totally put a damper in our whole plan. Oh shit, I don't know. I don't think so.
I'm gonna run down my apartment. So super quick. If they start earlier than 10:30, can you just start the camera?
Yeah.
I'll just have it. I'll just have it zoomed out.
Okay. You're just pressing the red button. Okay. Everything else is turned on and good to go.
Yeah, that's only if they start sooner than 10:30, but I'll be back on at like 10:20.
Okay. Yep. Next draft.
I slept for 2 hours last night. And it turns out,
yeah.
Drinks on you. Oh, that's what
Yeah, no, they have. Why? He said which one? I said, I also said. What? No! None of your business. Because I swiped on the wrong message and started typing and they both were it's like a usually get a techno problem. Yeah. None of your business. Look, knock it off. You're taking
move that over. Otherwise, we're cut off.
They sit there like, oh yeah.
Oh, they do. They actually.
Yeah, it's in
Yeah, that's a she's in bear on.
But we have the second one.
Yeah, really excited to get turned on. It's so hard. That's not fine.
Nope, not that I saw.
Sure, no, you gotta get a certification.
I've never been so happy to like you could choose my entire life. All of them.
Good morning. Could I request that you all start taking your seats so that we can get started on time with our next talk? Thank you. So good morning, and again, thanks everybody for being here, both our online guests and our guests here in Great Hall. My name is Becky Mansky. I'm a professor of history, and I've also been one of the 6 Catalyst 300 faculty mentors this semester, which has been a real pleasure. It's great to see all of these students working on real world problems and trying to find innovative solutions to those problems. So our talk that we're going to see right now, which is actually going to be our 5th talk of the day, is Our Planet is Going to Shit, How Proper Disposal of Cow Manure Will Mitigate Global Warming. So if I could have our group come up, please.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Haley and I'm here with my colleagues Forrest, Daisy, Janet, and Armando. And we're here today because, as our title so subtly suggests, our planet is going to shit. According to an article published in the Geophysical Research Letters, the global temperature has increased by 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit since pre-industrial times, which has been detrimental to our environment. We'll get into more specifics about that later. Thank you. But first we're going to talk a little bit about the scope of the problem, exactly how this problem had come to be, our proposed solution, why we think it will be effective. So the main reason that we, throughout our research this semester, one of the main reasons we found for this global increase is actually an excess of methane gas in our environment, particularly methane gas that has been emitted by the agricultural industry. So the way that the methane process works within the agricultural industry is first you have production. This usually occurs when livestock like cows, chickens, sheep eat food and then produce manure. From there, methane is emitted from the manure and into our environment, which then leads to a, again, detrimental effect on our environment. Now, to see why this is such a big problem and why the agricultural industry is one of the worst perpetrators of this problem, let's take a look at some information from the USDA. First of all, the agricultural industry is the industry with the highest increase in overall greenhouse gas emissions. According to the USDA, greenhouse gas emissions from the agricultural industry have increased by 17% in the last 10 years. In comparison, the residential industry has decreased 13% and transportation has decreased 8%. Furthermore, we can see that methane production within the agricultural industry itself has actually increased 68% in the last 5 years. This is a massive increase that has, again, very direct impact on our environment and our Earth. Getting into a little more about the specifics of those impacts, it can have, again, this 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit increase in our global atmosphere has had impacts on our weather patterns, on glacial melting, as well as the agricultural industry itself. Now, methane itself is actually the most effective greenhouse gas at trapping heat in our atmosphere. It's about 20 to 30 times more effective, according to the USDA, than other greenhouse gases. So when we have an excess, like an 68% increase in this gas, it can again have the most impact on environmental factors. Now getting into more of a statistical analysis, just seeing how big this issue is, there's about 260 million metric tons of methane gas that are produced from livestock in the agricultural industry per year. This is a massive amount of methane gas that again has only been increasing. Again, there's a 43% percentage of actual livestock emissions in the entire agricultural industry, which makes up about 9% of the methane emissions in the United States alone. Now, to get into more about why we chose to tackle methane rather than other sources of methane, manure rather than other sources of methane emissions, I'm going to hand it off to Forrest.
Thank you, Haley. So here we have two pie charts that show the sources of emissions from the entire agricultural industry. A large majority of the emissions are from a process called enteric fermentation. Enteric fermentation can basically be thought of as cow burps. It's the gases released during the digestive process of cattle. So our reasoning behind not tackling the biggest source of the emissions is because that the manure management system is the only source of emissions that has been actually increasing since 1990. The manure management portion of the emissions has increased about 7.7%, whereas enteric fermentation has seen a decrease of 5%, and other sources of emissions have gone down about 3%. So that is why we deemed this problem to be the most addressable, because nobody else is really addressing it.
So yeah, through our research, we have found 3 current solutions that seem to be kind of temporary, but aren't really permanent. They aren't really solving the problem. So our first one would be the drying of manure. This is oftentimes more used for farmers, and we see that the process of drying manure can take 4 to 6 weeks just to do this. Plus, they use a lot of water, and then of course, energy sources are being used. So some of the pros for this would obviously be that if they do this correctly, they would be able to use this for fertilizer for their farms, of course, and then bedding for their livestock, or as well as an energy source. And if they do want, farmers can then sell this off to other farms or smaller farms and make a profit for this. Our second existing solution is diet modifications. So we know that cows already have a set and strict diet, yet farmers are starting to move toward more natural compounds for their cows. So they are starting to use seaweed, oils, and more synthetic chemicals, sorry. And then from this, they would then move toward giving off a healthier food for their cows, and then later on, starting to make sure that their cows are not giving off so much emission. So our third one would be the dung beetles. So the dung beetle is basically a beetle that feeds off of feces. I don't know about you, but that kind of sounds a little gross. So then these beetles are then put into the manure, they dig themselves, and then they lay their eggs. So we see that with this, in a study done in Spain in La Madrid National Park, these were actually, within the first 20 days, reduced the 17% less emission into the environment. So we see that these actually do have some pros, yet to keep these alive, they actually have to have a little bit more warmer climates. So for farmers, they would have to have some sort of good taking care of them.
So now we're going to get into our actual plan for how we want to better the manure management systems in the agricultural industry. So what we devised is a 3-step process: production, collection, and processing. The first step is the collection. So right now, most cattle farms have either an in-ground lake or collection bin, which their manure runs off into and is stored. Right now, those collection bins are usually open to the atmosphere, meaning that all the emissions are just emanating into the atmosphere. So the first step of our system is to place a rubber cover over whatever existing collection system that they have. That cover would then air seal around the bottom and be conical in shape. So that the top of it would be a turbine meter, which pulls the gas up from the manure and then measures it and compresses it down a pipeline towards the processing area. Now this processing area can have 2 possible ways that they go about it, depending on what the farm's preference is. The first way is filtration, on-site filtration. If it's a larger farm, they can afford the upfront cost of an on-site filtration system in order to turn the raw gases into a usable, burnable methane fuel. Otherwise, they can have an on-site container, which would store the raw materials, which they can then sell off to a filtration company in order to increase revenue. So what we have here is a very rough sketch of what this system would look like. So you have your storage tank for the manure down here, and then you have your conical cover up top with the turbine meter at the top connected to the pipeline, which can then either go to the on-site filtration to be repurposed and reused to make the farm more self-sustaining, or stored and then sold off to an off-site filtration company in order to increase some more profits for the farm.
So as Forrest was saying, that there's a lot of reasons that this would work out, but one of the main reasons is that it can be used as a renewable energy source. Some things that methane can be used to fuel are water heaters, clothes dryers, stoves, and it's actually more efficient than propane, which we will get into a little later. It also has minimal health risks compared to propane. The top diamond is methane, where the bottom diamond is propane, and in blue is the health risk. So methane is rated a 1, which means, according to the National Fire Protection Association, that it can only cause mild irritation, where propane is rated a 2, which can cause temporary incapacitation or residual injury. So it is a much safer method of getting renewable energy. And they are also rated equally in flammability, which is in red, and instability, which is in yellow, and they do not have any special hazards, which would be in white. So as I had said, methane is a better energy source as it's more efficient than propane. These graphs here show it rated in British thermal units. So British thermal units are the amount of heat needed to raise 1 pound of water by 1 degree Fahrenheit. So this is about 1,000 joules or 250 calories. So methane is more energy efficient than propane, which is in the middle, by about 2,000 British thermal units, 2 million joules or 500,000 calories. And it's even more efficient than other natural gases, which is the far right, by about 4,000 British thermal units, 4 million joules or about 1 million calories. And then to further incentivize farms to switch over to this method, they could get renewable energy credits. According to the National Conference of State Legislators, 9 states already classify methane as a renewable energy source, and places can acquire renewable energy credits, which can incentivize farms to go to this method and use methane gas as an energy source.
We realize that the purchasing of our product would be a large upfront cost to small-scale farms. There are a number of various resources available to combat this issue. Our first resource is through grants. There are various region-specific grants for the purpose of agricultural sustainability. An example of a grant offered in Wisconsin is the North Central Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Grant. This grant varies from values of $9,000, $18,000, and $27,000. This would make our product more affordable to small-scale farms. Our next resource would be a tax reduction. This would go through the state level, and this would cover the cost of equipment used in the methane reduction process. This would also cover the cost of the installation fees. Our final resource would be contracts. We would need a manufacturer who could produce at a large scale. Our choice on manufacturer would be reliant on a company's ability to produce with efficiency and the least harmful towards the environment. For the production process, we would need manufacturer and installation contracts. And for the benefit of both the farmers and the methane buyers, we would help connect the farmers with natural gas processing plants.
All right, so as with any proposed solution to a problem that we have in this world, there are potential harms that could potentially come from it. Our group has identified 2 of these main harms, the first being the environmental harm of actually using this system. This would include things like the actual production and use of the system, as well as if those farms were to sell their natural gas, the environmental impact of transport systems. Now, there are existing solutions for this, like using already existing transport systems, but the larger argument here is that the amount of methane that our system could potentially increase in our environment far outweighs the minuscule environmental impacts that this new system may actually produce. A cost-benefit analysis will show that it has a better effect on the environment if we were to decrease this methane gas because it is one of the most dangerous natural greenhouse gases. The second potential harm of the system is, of course, the cost. Now, our cost is essentially made up of 2 parts. You have the initial cost, the installation of the system, and then the annual cost of actually maintaining the system. Because we designed this system ourselves, we don't have a definite cost of how much it would cost to produce and install this system. However, based on our best estimates, it would be anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 for an initial cost, with an upkeep annual cost of about $1,000. To sort of put this in perspective, a new tractor for a farm would cost anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000. And as Armando mentioned before, though this would be more ideal for larger farms who could afford this upfront cost, there are grants and tax deductions that are available for smaller farms who would like to implement this system. So in summary, even though there are some downfalls and some potential harms to our system, we ultimately believe that our plan is superior to already existing plans. It reduces the methane on a farm-to-farm basis, has the potential to completely eliminate methane emissions from manure in the agricultural industry on a farm-to-farm basis. In the entire industry, it could decrease anywhere from 50 to 70%. At the very least, it would halt that 68% increase that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. Lastly, it empowers farmers. It allows farmers to make the choice to be more sustainable. As we mentioned earlier, global rising temperatures have a detrimental effect on the agricultural industry, which hurts farmers individually. If they were to implement this system, it would empower them to reduce their effect on the environment, which then the environment would reduce its effect on them. Now, again, lastly, it is cost effective. There are grants available, tax deductions available, and ultimately, we believe that our system, if put into practice, would dramatically decrease the methane emissions at a low cost in general. So, with that, I would like to open it up to some questions.
Thanks, and as Haley said, we're ready for some questions from the audience.
So you just mentioned the cost effectiveness. So if you have, because there's also other alternatives for renewable energy. So if you take into account solar energy, so you just mentioned the cost in between 5,000 to 10,000. So how it will be more effective for the farmers because you can buy the same amount you can have the solar panels for small scale agriculture farms. So how do you consider your kind of proposed solution be more effective? Besides, there is more less expensive, for example, solar panels for the agriculture farms, especially the smaller scales.
Right. So the question is, why is our idea more sustainable than solar or something like that for powering farms? Our goal is not to provide farms with sustainable energy. That's more so a byproduct of what we're trying to do. Our main goal is the reduction of those methane emissions, which whether that refinement and reuse of the collected methane actually impacts the farm sustainability in a substantial way. If it impacts it at all, that's just an added plus to the collection or the reduction of methane in the atmosphere.
Furthermore, you mentioned the cost of our system in comparison to other things like solar panels. The thing that is unique about our system is that the farmers can actually have a very strong return on investment if they choose to sell the natural gas or reuse it for their farms. They're saving money in the long run, which will eventually offset the cost of actually implementing the system, which is why it's more effective than, say, the upfront cost of solar panels, which you get no return on investment in a lot of ways.
The only farm that I'm aware of in this area that's installed this kind of biodigester for generating electricity is the Rosendale Dairy, a few miles east of Ripon. Could you comment on the experience of that farm in terms of the costs of generating electricity that way, as well as reducing emissions, and what that tells us about the cost effectiveness for much smaller farms, which may have lesser environmental impacts in other ways?
Yeah, so in particular, we didn't look at that particular farm. We began this project specifically targeting larger mass farms because they're the ones that have the most contribution to this methane. I believe they make up some 40-some% of the entire agricultural industry. So they have the largest impact, and that was our initial problem that we were attempting to approach with this solution. And then later on, we realized that it possibly could be implemented on smaller farms for a reduced cost that could be environmentally and financially sustainable, but our focus was always the larger farms. Does that answer your question?
It seems to me that you're treating a symptom, again, not the cause. It's a really important sense. You began by saying, here are the various ways in which manure has been handled, but you didn't raise the question of why do we have all this manure? And the truth is we have an industrial system of death. Literally millions of animals being created to die. So when one has one's afternoon hamburger for lunch, one's not only accepting a system of absolute suffering, but also environmental devastation. So I'm curious, any more analyses and research, have you considered at all whether the problem is much bigger than anything we solve with a technological solution? Is this really a moral problem in some ways?
Yeah, most definitely. As many of you may know, the best thing that you can do for the environment is to stop eating meat. That is sort of the root cause of this. It's why we have these industrial farms. However, that's not a very feasible or appealing solution to a lot of people. So our goal with this project was to make something that we thought actually could be implemented. Like, yes, in an ideal world, we would stop eating so much meat, as you suggested, Stephen. But in practicality, this is a more sort of feasible solution to like what we were trying to address.
Additional questions?
Just like a small question. So is it like any way you guys are looking to like commercialize it? Because Professor Harvey just pointed out, like there's only one farm like in Wisconsin, I think, like in the near area. So are you guys have like any like ideas like how to commercialize your like proposed solution?
So for commercialization, our steps that we would take beyond this in order to actually implement this would primarily be we need contacts from investors, and then beyond that, we would need to work with manufacturing companies. And we saw these as things that would have happened after we gave a presentation like this. So the commercialization is definitely what the next step is. Going about that and actually solidifying those kinds of leads is something that we may look forward to in the future. But right now we were just kind of trying to give a conceptual answer to the problem. Does that answer your question?
Further questions? All right, please join me in thanking our group. Thank you everyone for watching this talk, for joining us. Our next talk will begin at 11 a.m.
That's right.
I didn't have to solve it, so I just.
Yes.
And then like I realized yeah. And then I know, I used
Like you just lost your rhythm.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And of course, I noticed that. I don't think a lot of people know, but like, I noticed it.
That's because I was listening and I know your speaking style.
It's alright.
What? It's not sexual.
Thank you. Kind of got messed up because yeah, during how tired Lindsay Bloomer podcast just a template for ethics school, and then like snatching out pictures of so good. And I asked her if I could do it, and she's like, yeah, I wouldn't know, like,
Good morning. Thanks for being here this morning. Welcome to all of our guests online, and welcome to everyone here in the Great Hall, including those who might have just joined us. Thanks for being here to hear the presentations from our Catalyst 300 Applied Innovation Seminar students. They've been working on these projects all semester long, coming up with solutions to real-world problems. Our next talk is going to be on combating non-point source pollution in the Ohio River through the use of green infrastructure. Please join me in welcoming our group.
All right, I'm Madeline. This is Emily, Jacob, Carly, and Tyler. And we are part of the Section 22 of Catalyst 300 program. The problem that we chose to tackle with our innovative solution is that of water. The United Nations recognizes water as a human right and need for survival. But unfortunately, across the globe, there are many places where potable water is not to be found or is very difficult to access. What we decided to focus on for our project was non-point source pollution and an area that it affects specifically in the United States. Tyler.
As Maddie stated, we're looking at non-point source pollution, or NPS pollution. Non-point source pollution is defined as pollution resulting from many large non-identical sources. When looking at this picture here, you can see all the aspects that go into non-point source pollution, with that being either parking lots, construction sites, leach fields, and fertilizers. The issue with this is when rainwater comes and brings these aspects into the water, bacteria is then put in the water and comes in contact with both humans and animals. The source that we decided to look at is the Ohio River. It's important to say that the Ohio River is one of the most polluted water sources in the United States today. When looking at this picture, we see that the river starts up here in Pennsylvania and it flows all the way down to the southern tip in Cairo, Illinois. That's a total of 6 states for 981 miles. 25 million people come in contact with this water on a daily basis, and that's not including the millions of animals that also come in contact with this. For example, that being deer, migratory birds, and of course aquatic life. This number should be higher though, due to the river flowing into the Mississippi here. As you can see here, this is the point that it meets. It's important to point out just how the river looks right here. You can see the coloration difference between the two. The Mississippi obviously ranges from Minnesota all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, and that also contributes to millions of people. So let's say non-point source pollution is in the Ohio River. It is then brought to the Mississippi River itself. This issue has gotten so big that a foundation was created called the Ohio River Foundation. Essentially, the Ohio River Foundation is a foundation of thousands of people coming together on separate points of the year and trying to clean up the river at different points of the river. More specifically, we are looking at Cincinnati itself. As you can see here, these are the 5 major cities that the river flows through. You can see that Cincinnati is the second most major city that it flows through, and you can see the proximity of how close the river is to the city. It's important to show you guys that it also flows from east to west. And as stated earlier, some things that contribute to non-point source pollution include construction sites, vehicle and parking lot runoff, and pesticide runoff. Some health issues that go along with these runoffs include birth defects, blue baby syndrome, cancers, and mercury damage to wildlife. One previous solution that we came across was the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act was introduced in 1972 and was passed by President Nixon. $650 million was put into this act, and it covers the whole country. The Clean Water Act, it established the basic structure for regulating pollutants into the pollutant discharges into the water of the United States. The EPA, or the Environmental Protected Agency, is in charge of controlling this act, and this is their logo right here. And they have the authority to implement pollution standards for both industry and people. Carly will now talk about the second approach to combat against NPS pollution.
Our second solution was looking at green infrastructure. Green infrastructure is defined as an approach to water management that protects, restores, and/or mimics the natural water cycle. Green infrastructure is implemented all over the world, including London, the United States, and even in Wisconsin. Now moving on to some types of green infrastructure. First up, we have swales. A swale is similar to a ditch, but it has a level bottom. However, instead of removing water like a ditch would, it fills up like a bathtub and holds that water, allowing it to absorb into the landscape. Swales help avoid flooding, soil erosion, and collect water which can be recycled and used to irrigate a garden. The cost of a swale can range from the cost of a shovel and doing it yourself, like this one, or it can a higher level one, which can cost anywhere between $450 and $850 per linear foot. Next, we have rain gardens. A rain garden is a garden of native shrubs, perennials, and flowers that are planted in a small depression. A rain garden is designed to temporarily hold and soak in rainwater runoff. As you can see in this picture, it's holding more water. Compared to a normal lawn, rain gardens soak up to 30% more water. Installing a rain garden on a commercial, industrial, or institutional site can cost anywhere between $10 to $40 per square foot. Next, we have green roofs. A green roof is an extension of an existing roof, which involves high-quality waterproofing, root repellent system, drainage system, lightweight growing medium, and plants. Green roofs improve air quality, store water until it is returned to the atmosphere through transpiration and evaporation, and reduce energy costs. In summer, green roofs can retain up to 70 to 90% of precipitation, and in the winter, up to 25 to 40% of precipitation. The EPA estimates the cost of installing a green roof between $10 to $25 per square foot, with an annual maintenance cost ranging from 75 cents to $1.50 per square foot. Compared to asphalt shingles, which can range anywhere between $70 to $160, or metal roofing, which can range from $120 to $900 per square. Additionally, green roofs can double or triple the lifespan of a roof up to 60 years or longer. Lastly, we have permeable pavement. Permeable pavement is a type of pavement that allows for infiltration of fluids. As you can see, water is obviously going through it. This reduces flooding and traps solids and pollutants on the surface, keeping them from polluting the water stream. In this next picture, you can see the difference between on the right side with permeable pavement and the left side with no permeable pavement, the water just sits on top. So the cost of permeable pavement is approximately $4 to $6 per square foot, with an average size driveway costing approximately $5,000.
All right, so there are some disadvantages of both of these previous solutions. First of all, the Clean Water Act, as Tyler stated, was enacted in 1972. Over time, it has become very outdated and it hasn't really been updated to fit new innovation in cleaning up water pollution and new ways different corporations may dispose of water pollution. Another thing about it is that it's very difficult to enforce. While the EPA has control over larger corporations and companies, private citizens and smaller private businesses don't really have a water police checking to make sure that they're doing things correctly. And there's no way to really make sure that everyone is disposing of their water in the safest manner possible for other water sources. And finally, the Clean Water Act doesn't really allow for the different needs of different regions. It is a nationwide act, and the needs of places like California, which is more desertous, and places like the Appalachians, vary greatly, and the amount of pollution, NPS pollution or otherwise, changes for both of those regions. Green infrastructure is difficult to implement. If you already have a house built, especially if it's an older house,
it's hard to put in a green roof. And some people don't know that they can. There's a lot of community apathy towards it because people just don't know about green infrastructure. They don't know about rain gardens. They don't know about swales. And so they don't really care. And a lot of the times when it is implemented in a community, it's often a government project, something like a Parks and Rec Department project to improve the community, so people don't think of it as something that a private citizen can do to improve their own lot.
So our solution is a two-part innovative solution based around not only a grassroots campaign about educating the public, as well as creating a top-down piece of legislation to help pull a different audience. The first part is a comprehensive education campaign based around getting people to want to implement green infrastructure. This is built around emotional appeals and to get people to show them the issues that are involved with the river and get them to want to do something about it. It is built around, the first part is a social media campaign built around Facebook, using Facebook's algorithms and statistical data that show for a consistent posting schedule and on peak user days to help drive engagement for the local groups that would implement this part of the solution. The campaign would run for 2 months, with the first month being with 2-day posting on Tuesdays. On the first month would show the issues of the river. This would be everything that was talked about earlier about what's wrong with the river. And then on Thursdays, it's about the groups, what the group's mission statement is, what they've done in the past to help drive and help grow that group's engagement. Because anything that helps the group grow helps our campaign as well. The second month is about green infrastructure. Tuesdays would be about what the green infrastructure is, what it does, why it's beneficial for people to implement green infrastructure. While on Thursdays, it's about what the group has done or wants to do in the future to help grow them further. We also created posters for this.
Right, so something that we worked on with these posters was using basic marketing and display techniques to make them more eye-catching and approachable. Have a swale of a good time. It's silly, but you'll remember it. It's catchy. And so we tried to use things like bright colors that complement each other so that they catch the eye and make people pay more attention in conjunction with catchy phrases in these posters to make people pay more attention to them. And these are things that corporations, companies, or places like the Ohio River Foundation could use on Facebook, Instagram, in newspapers, in magazines, whatever medium they need to inform the public about what they're doing with different types of green infrastructure. And something else that we tried to do was keep the information on these posters limited. There's a general definition of what each type of infrastructure is, and then there's the cost, and then there's a little blurb, just a description of how you can put it into your own home or your own private lot. So to keep this nice and concise, it's easy to catch the eye, people pay more attention to it, they can take in a fair amount of information on a quick little poster.
So the second half of our solution is a piece of legislation implemented at the local level about a change in how water bills are calculated. The goal for this, well, the first part of the solution, the education campaign, gets the people who care already and shows them what they can do. This part is meant to pull from that apathetic middle, the people who don't care enough about the issues, but still want to save money for themselves and in turn helps the environment. This would be implemented through a multiplier added to the end of how the water bill is already calculated. So if you can see from the function on the top left, in an example lot of someone owning their lot that is entirely just a rain garden, 100% permeable, they would pay about half their current water bill. While if their lot was nothing but pure cement, they'd pay about 1.5 times their current water bill as a way to incentivize people to implement different green infrastructure options. Now, if the city thought this was too much of a drastic change, there is a second option. It's easy to edit slightly. Changing the denominator from 100 to 200 shrinks the impact in a way so that instead of only being half, it's 0.75, while on the 1.5, it's 1.25, which will lower the impact while still making an effect. This would be implemented through GPS programs which already exist that would take a picture of the lot from satellite and then determine the percentage that is permeable within the lot itself to determine the function. The biggest disadvantage to this plan is the fact that it's two separate parts, that without this water bill, there's nothing except an education campaign. It's just information being put out there, but that still helps. Any little bit that people do still helps the environment and still helps the river and the people that live there. There's also the problem of cost. Theoretically, were every single lot 100% permeable, the city would lose half its income from water, from the water department. But this would be mitigated because the water filtration systems would have less strain on them in the area, as well as tourism it would increase. Not only because the river's cleaner, but also because the fact that the city brought this up as an issue and implemented this to show it was an issue brings it more into the people's eye. And that, there's also the issue that this is kind of small, it's on a certain small area, and it wouldn't necessarily affect the big rivers, but that actually goes into its greatest strength. The fact that this is a small, single city area compared to the entire United States, but it means it can grow. For example, local groups in Pittsburgh pick up this education campaign, and then as more people learn about it, they learn about what Cincinnati did to their water bill. And that gets implemented in Pittsburgh, maybe edited slightly so that it gets passed, but it still has an effect. And then everyone in Cincinnati has now cleaner water than they had before because Pittsburgh's water is cleaner. And it keeps spreading across the entire nation because it can.
So as Maddie alluded to at the beginning of this presentation, water is the most important medium in the world. It's essential for all life, and more importantly to life than just water is clean water. And the reality is that the majority of the water on our planet is not actually accessible for our use, and the water that is available is subject to pollution. Non-point source pollution is the biggest threat to this water quality in the US. As deemed by the EPA, non-point source pollution is the leading form of pollution in lakes, rivers, and streams across the country. It's for this reason we chose this form of pollution to focus on. In researching past solutions for the improvement of water quality, Tyler told us that we looked at the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act is a nationwide act, and while it had a nationwide impact in improving the water quality, it neglected to identify specific bodies of water that needed more attention than others. It's for this reason we chose a specific body of water, the Ohio River, which the EPA also deemed, as Tyler mentioned, one of the most polluted rivers in the US. In further research into specific solutions to combat non-point source pollution, Carly told us that we found green infrastructure. We really liked the idea of green infrastructure because it does what it's supposed to do, and that is that it returns water to the ground where it falls. If we can do this, return water where it falls, it reduces the amount of runoff that actually flows into the combined water source, in our case, the Ohio River, thus reducing the amount of pollutants that can actually reach that point, therefore reducing the amount of pollution in the river itself. In sticking with the idea of green infrastructure, we realized that it had disadvantages, like Maddie mentioned. The biggest one being that how do we get people to actually implement green infrastructure on an individual basis? The idea is that if we can get many people to implement this, it'll increase the area of water that's actually makes into the ground rather than flowing into the combined source. And so we took another cue from the Clean Water Act to do so. The Clean Water Act put regulation on individuals, enforcing them or suggesting that they act on behalf of the community and in this case the environment as a whole. So how we adapted this to our plan was we modified the water bill in such a way that it would incentivize individuals to implement green infrastructure on an individual level. Therefore, it was through the inspiration of these past solutions that we came up with our own innovative solution of incentivizing the use of green infrastructure on an individual basis so that we would increase the area over which rainwater and stormwater is absorbed, thus reducing the amount of runoff that enters lakes, rivers, and streams, and therefore reducing the amount of pollution that reaches them. Thank you for your time and attention. We'd be happy to take any questions you may have for us. All right,
We have a microphone available for any questions. And I'm back there.
Great presentation. Am I thinking about this right? The focus is on increasing permeability, reducing kind of standing water around the community. Is that?
Yeah, to an extent. So more so we want ways to cool rainwater or stormwater runoff, and green infrastructure does that to an extent. That's kind of its focus, so that it will enter the ground where it falls rather than all running off and combining in the water, because the more surface that water runoff covers, the more pollutants it can pick up.
If we reduce standing water, is there also another advantage in reducing maybe the reproductive cycle of mosquitoes? During, there's a lot of pesticides that go around controlling mosquito populations. If you reduce the amount of standing water by making pavements and gardens less likely to secure standing water. I don't know, did you come across anything?
We actually did not, but that's a really interesting thing to look into for sure.
Earlier you mentioned the price of the alternative pavement that the water runs through, but what is the comparison of that pavement to regular pavement? And additionally, can that pavement also hold as much weight as regular pavement can and last as long as that?
So in our research of permeable pavement, we found that the lifetime of permeable pavement is much shorter than the lifetime of like regular non-permeable pavement. The cost, I believe, is
60% less.
60% less, yeah, but it could potentially add up to be more as it has to be replaced more often. But we don't have exact numbers on that, but that's kind of a little bit of a synopsis. Does that help? Does that answer your question? Actually, with that note too, sorry, so I was saying anything with that. We also, with the non-permeable pavement, the thought that we had with that was focusing on more like sidewalk areas and areas that experience less heavy traffic. So like, actually we were kind of thinking about where might be good places, things like this around campus. And I don't know if you remember when we had all that snow melt, but all the, like right outside here actually, we thought that maybe some like, just like even sections of permeable pavement along this area might be good, because then water, instead of like having to run in that direction, could start seeping there and seeping there, so that when we get down over here, there's not a huge pool of water. And you could even implement it like up on top of the hill on upper campus there, so that instead of like the water running down the hill, we might have more opportunities for it to sink in. Granted, there's not a lot of pavement up there, but that was just a thought we had with that. So.
We talked a lot about individual actions, and that's awesome, but when you think about like in cities where like most of like the huge pavement are, it's like the big corporations and like the huge, big. So how would you impact on a bigger level, not just individual?
A lot of commercial and industrial buildings already implement green roofs, so that's a start with implementing it with like industries and less of an individualized approach. And again, with permeable pavement, like we can implement it here at Ripon College, and it wouldn't be that big of a problem.
We had talked about several different companies. There are a lot of places like Procter & Gamble that have their headquarters in Cincinnati. So we had talked about different companies, like them using them in like their corporate parks, things like rain gardens and green roofs, things like that around the city, not necessarily right downtown, because as you said, skyscrapers are a bit cumbersome with that kind of thing. But there are several things besides Procter & Gamble, I can't remember off the top of my head, that are based in the city that could implement these things, and other places that have done green initiatives before.
And while the bill, we focused it about the individual, because the plan is the individual aspect, everybody would still have the same effect on their water bill. So businesses, while it would impact them less because they have more income, they'd be able to make more than some family that's going back and doing that. So we didn't focus on that as much because they'd have less incentive to do so. but it would still affect them, and if they wanted to do that, there would still be an incentive for them to implement these green infrastructures.
And oftentimes smaller privately owned, like family businesses as well, won't be right downtown, which is nice. And if they have their own space, they can implement that a bit more easily and save more money. All right, please join me in thanking our latest group. And thank you all for participating in Catalyst Day. Our next talk will begin at 11:30.
Hey, how you
Yeah, then when do they start back up? 30?
They have
Oh yeah, the hackathons and now it's got 240 is the preliminary round. So they get from 145 to 2 of the handheld
on that first presentation, it was almost like essentially about that, especially the ones that those ones always go on that.
An hour and 49 minutes. So we'll have to stop by and
I'll go back and start downloading it.
it's not clear.
There's stuff on it, but it's like 3 hours, 4 hours. Don't worry about it. I think that's part of this is all right. That's like I try to do that.
Hello and welcome to our final Catalyst 300 Applied Innovation Seminar presentation this morning on Catalyst Day. Again, we have another group of fantastic students who have been working on solution all semester to a real world problem. So I would like to turn it over to our group talking about reducing anxiety and depression among new college students, easing transitions, and improving student health and wellness throughout college.
Hello, we are More Espresso, Less Depresso. I am Carissa, this is Carl, Grace, Taya, and Junmo, and we are working on reducing anxiety and depression among new college students by easing the transition and improving student wellness throughout college. So specifically, we would like to focus on new college students as well as transfer students, as well as small private colleges such as Ripon here in Wisconsin. So our idea is that the transition phase into college equals a lot of stress. And with increased stress can come a lot of harmful effects if that's not kept in check. So UW-Madison here, about 25% of their student population has been diagnosed with some sort of mental illness, and that is the percentage that has been diagnosed. So Ripon College in 2017-2018, about 20% of the student body saw counseling services, and about 31% of those people were first years. 46 people reported depressive symptoms, while 50 people reported anxiety symptoms via self-report. So stress can evolve into anxiety and depression, and then anxiety and depression can lead to other harmful things such as suicide in serious cases. So suicide is actually the second leading cause of death among college students. And according to Tom and Thompson, 90 to 95% of those that have died by suicide actually could have been treated for their mental illness. So overall, the patients are students, the students become employees, and the employees make up society.
Now that we've identified the problem, let's talk about some of the existing solutions that have been created over the years to try and solve that problem. The first one that we're going to talk about today is counseling. Now, counseling here at Ripon College is actually in the form of counseling services at third floor Bartlett, which is connected to this building right over there. Many assumptions go into counseling, the first being that all students know about their college's mental health resources and counseling services. This is a common misconception. I've talked to plenty of students here at Ripon College that even need it drastically more than others and don't know how to schedule a counseling session with our college counselors, as well as they're unaware of many of the mental health resources that are available online, such as free screenings and etc. Another assumption that goes into counseling is that counseling is a cure for depression. This is also a misconception. Counseling is meant as a tool to help through a counselor to help a patient identify stressors and other factors that are causing mental health issues in that patient's life, and to help try and develop new techniques and new ways of thinking to help improve their mental health. Outcomes of counseling can vary. However, it has been shown that counseling is much more effective, or just as effective, at treating anxiety and depression as medication is. However, it's still not a cure. The effectiveness of counseling and reasons why that counseling has not reduced the problem that we've identified are for reasons such as some people just don't believe in therapy and counseling. Unless there is a patient or a student who has shown signs that they are going to attempt suicide or have taken steps to carry it out, you cannot force a student to sit on a counseling session and actually improve their own mental health issues. It has to be by their own choice, and they have to want to improve and help with their own mental health. Another reason that counseling has not significantly reduced the problem is because of the stigma on counseling. For men specifically, we're taught from a young age to hide our emotions and just show nothing but strength. Going out and trying to ask for help and talking about our emotions can be seen as a sign of weakness and can keep multiple individuals from seeking the help they may need. And the final reason why counseling has not significantly reduced the problem is the limited number of resources on college campuses and universities. In 2016, survey of counselor center directors found that there is one counselor on average for every 1,737 students. Though Ripon College is a much smaller school, the proportions about one counselor for every 500 students is still very big, and something that we are going to try and solve through our applied innovation. Now, the consequences of counseling are, it can be a waste of time and resources for the counselors, the college, and the patient if the counseling session does not actually help improve the mental health of that patient. The next existing solution we'd like to talk about is that of medication. There are many forms of medication for depression and anxiety. We decided to focus on antidepressants, which are a broad class of medications that are commonly used in the treatment of depressive disorders. Many assumptions go into medication as well. The first being that it is a bona fide solution. This is false. I will talk about this more in a sec, but medication is meant to treat the symptoms of mental illnesses rather than actually cure it. The next is that once positive effects from medication have been noticed in patients, they may believe that they can stop taking the medication and that they're all better. This is false. If a patient or a student decides to stop taking the medication, any positive effects from that medication that they were experiencing will disappear, and the symptoms from their mental health impairment will come back full force with time. And the final assumption is that medical doctors are just as effectively able to diagnose and prescribe medication to patients and students as mental health professionals are. The training between medical doctors and mental health professionals in terms of diagnosis and identifying mental illnesses is very different. Thus, there is a very fine line in training that we would like to identify and show that can cause problems as far as giving medication to patients. Now, the outcomes of medications can vary based on patient to patient, medication to medication. Antidepressants in particular have been shown to have a 50 to 60% success rate in alleviating the negative symptoms of mental illnesses in patients. Medication can do many things for a student or patient, such as brighten their mood, help with sleep, increase their energy levels, and help them cope with daily life. However, most medications still do come with side effects. And a final outcome that can occur with medications is if a misdiagnosis occurs, that false positive can lead to a wrong medication being given to a patient, or a patient being diagnosed with a medication when they may not need one at all. Now, the effectiveness of medication and why it has not reduced our problem that we've identified are for the fact that medications are meant to alleviate the symptoms of mental illnesses and not cure them. Now, the consequence of medications, like I've stated, most medications come with various side effects that cause a variety of physical ailments to a patient that sometimes can be even worse than the actual mental illness that medication may be trying to treat. Also, the return of depression and anxiety can come pretty quickly if a medication was stopped being taken by a patient. And finally, the lack of trained providers that we see on our college campuses contributes to the problem of mental health illnesses among college students.
So what our solution strives to do is address issues through all 4 years of college. And we don't want to leave students just dropped into college where you're suddenly making a lot of your own choices. You have a lot of different options available to you. You're suddenly responsible for a lot of different things that you haven't been responsible for before. So we want students to feel supported and know all the great resources that are available at a campus like Ripon College. The first year, there's a lot going on, so most of our programming and focus is on the first year and helping students establish healthy habits and making sure that they're educated about what they need to do to stay healthy. There's a really strong mental and physical health balance with one going up, the other goes up as well, and they can fall at the same time as well. So the first year, we really want to help students transition well. We want them to know what's available on campus, know how to take care of themselves. We just want them to feel supported and welcomed to the campus where they're joining. Second year, sophomore year, there's a lot of emphasis on future, what your career is going to be, what major you're going to declare. There's a lot of pressure and stress that can cause students to begin feeling anxious and begin having a lot of doubt that sophomore year. So we really want students to feel like they have the information and help they need to choose that future career. Junior year balance is really tough. You've got things like Catalyst 300, really hard classes coming at you, and you really want to do your best, but you also need to take care of yourself. You need to have that work-life balance. And so in junior year, we want to help students be reminded that take time for you, keep yourself healthy, don't spend all your time doing homework in your room, because that's no fun. Senior year, we also want to focus on another transition. That's a transition out of college, which can be scary as well. You're about to take on a whole new lifestyle. So we want students to feel like they've got all the info they need to do their own taxes, or move into grad school, or just move into that next stage of life. So the first thing we'd really like to do is during Welcome Week. How many of you did Welcome Week activities at a university? Some of us? Yeah. How many of you did health and wellness Welcome Week activities? Yeah, our group didn't do health and wellness. We're not sure if we missed it, or maybe it just wasn't part of our curriculum, but we think that would be a great way that Ripon could kind of augment what's already going on. We have a great Welcome Week here, and so we'd like to implement an informational and interactive seminar for students. So we'd like to have an area professional. That could be an alumni, it could be health and wellness, really anyone who feels passionate about this coming in. The first component is education, telling students what's available here and telling students how to use those resources to take care of themselves, reminding them that you need to stay healthy physically if you want your mental health to stay good, vice versa. And then we also want to have an interactive component. A lot of our resources emphasize how important it is that peers discuss and how peer-to-peer interaction changes learning outcomes outside of the classroom and how that gets integrated into a lifestyle. So we want students to talk. And talking about something like this helps to reduce the stigma around it. We want talking about mental health, and we want seeing counselors and using resources, excuse me, to be a really encouraged and well-known activity here on campus. And then at the end of the seminar, we also want staff to be available if possible at the back of the room so students can go up, maybe shake a hand, meet someone before scheduling an appointment, maybe ask the scary question of, I'm not sure, I'm having a tough week, what should I do next? And so really get them started with strong relationships. We also would like to do an online screening during about the second month when students are here. This is a resource already available on the campus. We talked with the counselors here and none of us knew that this was already built into the budget. It's really credible and it's really helpful in helping you determine maybe what the next step for your own health is. And like Carissa mentioned, in 17 to 18, 142 students on the Ripon campus used counseling services. 31% of those students were freshmen. So clearly stress and anxiety doesn't just hit you junior year, senior year. Students come in with issues and things develop right away. And we want this to be a space for students to feel supported to improve their health or even work to heal some of the things going on.
So another part of our solution is required enrichment, and its purpose is to help students to build confidence and self-esteem. It's been reported that one feels a sense of having control of their own life when they're involved in activities such as chess, tennis, or yoga. And this sense of having control is essential to benefiting one's mental health. We also see this as an opportunity for students to make friends with common interests to cope with their mental health issues that they might be going through. We will require 20 hours of enrichment for first and second semesters for freshmen and transfers. Students will need to complete these hours in order to progress through the Catalyst program and ultimately graduate. We will have a tracking system similar to time cards, which means that students have to log in the hours themselves, and the members of faculty and student leaders will be responsible for logging off the hours that the students log in. There will be optional events like floor homework night, cooking and gaming events available to fill up the 20 hours of enrichment credit required that they were not able to complete from clubs. And for athletes, they will receive 20 hours of enrichment credit when credit for the semester that they're in season, as long as they're in good standing with their coach. There will be two 2-hour workshop called Fast Track between September 1st and September 15th for students that are interested in creating their own club that they're passionate about. Student government and faculty will be involved in designing and planning out the workshop. Students will learn about the process of creating clubs, receive guidance on creating constitution and fulfilling other requirements. It is also an opportunity for students to connect with volunteers, staffs, and members of faculty to receive the help they need to lead the club. Another part of our solution is a newsletter. Newsletter will be similar to college days, which means it is published monthly. It will be written by students and overseen by faculty and health service. It is a way to reach out to student population about the counseling service and other opportunities available on campus. It is an opportunity for education on campus, and there will be a first-person stories from students on how they took advantage of the opportunities that were given on campus and ultimately overcome the mental health issue that they had. This is similar to the portrait of Ripon on Facebook, which exists right now, but we want to expand on that through newsletter and focus on mental health.
So like Grace said, we want to carry this out through the whole 4 years you're here on this campus. All these workshops are open to anybody, any grade. But so your second year, we are going to require a meeting with someone who runs your major, so you can kind of get a career path lined out for what you want to do. There will be an optional workshop that you can learn how to apply for an internship, how to rework your resumes. Then your junior year, it's all about balance. Everything gets crazy. You get Catalyst 300, you get into your major classes. So we're doing a workshop to reiterate
balance, time management. So year 4, big transition out of college. You're either going to grad school or you're going into the workforce. There will be multiple workshops, some to negotiate raises, how to do your taxes, how to do your insurance. And the big one we're focusing on is whether you are going into grad school or not. So there will be 2 groups where you can focus on transitioning into the workforce, or you can focus on transitioning into grad school.
So to recap our solution here, the real problem that we're trying to fight is anxiety and depression that is caused by stress. And the existing solutions that are already available are counseling and medication, but they actually treat the symptoms rather than the actual problem, and we're trying to solve the problem itself. So our solution actually goes through all 4 years so that no one is left behind. It focuses on overall wellness as well as people having knowledge of the resources and the peer-to-peer contact, which plays a big role in healing.
So assessing success with mental health can often be really tough. When we talked to the counselors, we found it's really tough to assess occurrences because you can measure how many people are diagnosed, but that's only how many people want to report that they're diagnosed. Then you also have students who don't have diagnosed health issues, but those issues are still really present and play a big role in their everyday lives. And so we found that it's really not feasible to accurately measure occurrences, but what we can measure is use of resources. We can measure how many students are taking part in workshops. We can measure how many students are taking part in these purposeful events or using resources on campus, such as counseling services. And one way we can measure that, an example is there's an intake questionnaire when students have their first meeting with a counselor. And one question we can have on there is, how did you learn about this resource? And we're hoping to see that students are learning about resources and that traffic to those resources is increasing due to these workshops. We also want to continue to survey and see how we can make the program better for students. Every good program can always be made better, and this one is certainly no exception. And so we want to tailor it based on what students will find to be helpful for them. There are always a lot of barriers to something like this. We're hoping to keep the financial barrier as low as possible. We'd like to come in with our budget under $1,000. That newsletter would be printed in hopefully minimal quantities. Students could request that if they'd like, but mainly online. Also environmentally, just keeping it cleaner. And those other programs we'd like to work out as part of perhaps the Welcome Week budget already in place, using alumni volunteers and those just really passionate about student health. There are always issues like the time, the effort, and people who just feel differently about mental health than we do, but we hope to gently educate why this issue is important and why it needs to really be emphasized. That link to Catalyst is really just a way to ensure that students are taking part, because it's always hard to make sure that people are taking care of themselves. So something like the required enrichment does need sort of some enforcement. The additional stress that this is putting on students is not going to be significant because of the benefits that it's going to be giving. Also, students are already taking part in video game nights. So just make a video game club at Fast Track and you're set to go. All your enrichment hours are covered there. You've got something you're already doing. So we're treating the issue, not the symptom. We're addressing transition, which is a huge part of stress, addressing stigma, teaching students how to take care of themselves, and continuing this through all 4 years so we have the best students inside and outside of the classroom. We also wanted to thank Professor Cole, Professor Schatzinger, our mentor, Professor Resnikova, the Health and Wellness Services here, and anyone who maybe helped us and I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, but thank you so much for your work on this. We're ready for questions now.
Questions? We've got a microphone ready to go.
First of all, I would like to say thank you. The presentation was really good. The idea was were really good. So I just have one question. So do you guys have come up with a solution? How would you suggest the college to incorporate all these ideas? For example, in the Welcome Week, do you have any proposed solution to that problem?
Sorry, are you asking how we integrate this into Welcome Week?
Yeah.
We had thought that if it was possible to either add this as an event or perhaps substitute it with another event. We're hoping to keep it brief, about an hour and a half, so we really don't want it to become burdensome if it were in addition to what's already going on, or maybe integrating it with other educational components that the college wants to give to students and maybe deliver it in an integrated manner with those components.
Hi, this was a very interesting presentation. I had two questions. One is, it was interesting when you asked the audience how many people had participated in some kind of orientation. And you got like 3 hands raised, 2 of them came from faculty at the back. And that's surprising because I think every student here went through Welcome Week, where I'm pretty sure Chris would say there was an awful lot of the very thing you were asking about. One of the problems with adding the things to Welcome Week is that you get this kind of blah blah effect where a new student, a new anybody can only absorb so much, and then they tune it out and say, when's the party begin? And I'd like to hear you comment about that. And the second thing that struck me is the issue about the enrichment, the 20 hours enrichment, where you've got a massive difference between an athlete who comes here and automatically fulfills it by just going to practice, versus a student. And there's a paradox there because you're requiring something of the student in order then for them to enrich themselves. And anybody who's been in college knows that when you require people to do anything, they don't like it. So I was wondering if that had occurred to you and what you would have to say about that.
So for the required enrichment, the reason we decided to give athletes the credit for the semester that they're in season is because they put in a lot of hours of work, like going to practice and going to the matches. So the number of hours that add up is like way beyond 20 hours. So we just decided it would be best to just give them the credit that we believe that they deserve, as long as they are in good standing with their coach. And the reason we, thing with like being required, being a burden, that's why we decided to implement the fast track workshop, where students get an opportunity to create a workshop where they get a chance to get help to create a club that they're interested in joining. That way it's not something that's a burden to do, but something that they will enjoy being part of by joining a club.
So adding things to Welcome Week is always tough because students can always hide in their room, can always not take part. But for the most part, I was young and innocent once. And during Welcome Week, I did attend pretty much all the events. And I know I saw some of you there because I met you there. So some of you lied when you didn't raise your hands. But we know that students do attend those events, and it's just we really want to help students be educated about how to take care of themselves so they know right away. So there might be other ways to do that, like this newsletter. We really want to have resources available there. And of course, students cannot read that if they get it in their email, but we want to reiterate this component so that it really gets through to students, because we have a lot of students developing health issues just due to a lack of knowledge of how to take care of themselves and then a lack of spending the time on themselves that they need to spend. So you're right, that's always an issue and something to work out with timing.
How are you planning to address the anxieties that students might have before they come to school? Like if they're randomly getting paired for a roommate, they might be pretty worried about that, or just the transition from being with their parents to just being on their own, or just fitting in general, that sort of anxiety.
One thing with this workshop we really want to do during the interactive component is talk about what are we worried about and why, how can we deal with that worry, and why is this not as scary as it seems? Because often things look a lot scarier than they are. You guys feel free to weigh in on this, but there was a really great panel actually in this room this semester about mental health. And one thing they talked about is that you can heal mental health issues by building resilience and by overcoming trauma and by rebuilding that. And so part of what we're trying to do is rebuild that resilience and how people connect. Maybe you don't connect with your roommate well, but you are taking part in these enrichment hours, and you have a group that's doing yoga together like once a week, and you're also building Legos with people, so you're connecting with people who are similar to you in some ways, and so we're trying to help students make those important connections.
I think we have time for one more, if anyone has another question. All right, please join me in thanking our group. This concludes our morning Catalyst Day presentations. Before you get up, let's give a big, huge round of applause to our 300 students and mentors. That was really incredible work and incredible talks and all kinds of great ideas generated. So here's the plan for the rest of the day. We're going to take a break for lunch. At 1:30, the Applied Innovation Hackathon will start in this room. If you're a sophomore, junior, or senior and you missed out on signing up, we have a few spots available, so just come at 1:25 and you can join a team. If you're tuning in from beyond Ripon College, we will go live again at 2:30. And we'll screen the prelim rounds of the hackathon. And then at 3:30, we will screen the final round of the hackathon and roll right into our exciting keynote address by Will Allen. So I hope to see you back here. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you.